Time is a funny thing. The first time that you sat down with your favorite video game, you had no way of knowing how important that experience was going to be to you. Hell, you had no way of knowing that it was going to be important at all. The opening screens came up and you jumped in. You may not have even had a clue for a while if you even really liked the game. The first time I saw the train pull up in Final Fantasy VII, I had no idea what a ride I was in for. I just knew that it wasn't Metal Gear Solid. The first time I sat on the back of a boat staring at a journal, I had no idea how many tears I was about to shed. I just knew that it was a game that I was told by a bald YouTuber
Hello
was incredible. And the first time that I saw waves washing on the shore in Final Fantasy VIII, I had no idea that I was about to start my favorite video game of all time. I know it's a divisive game. Trust me, I'm well aware of how many people here on YouTube alone either hate this game or have serious issues with different elements of the gameplay and storytelling. But it doesn't change anything for me, and I know that I'm not alone. When I first picked up this game back in '99, I was extremely excited to see what Square had in store for me after their last epic. As I said before, more disc must equal more game, and this one looked even bigger than 7. And what I got blew away everything that I thought I knew about Final Fantasy. I've beaten this game several times, and I love so much about it. The characters here, from the brooding hero Squall Leonhardt, to his arch nemesis and garden rival, the arrogant Cypher Almasy, even the awkward oddball Laguna Loire, they all hold places in my mind as one of my favorite video game casts ever. There's just so much that makes this game a masterpiece, at least in my eyes. Now in this video, I'll be diving deep into the game, looking at it from the perspective of a fan who holds this game in very high regard. I've got a special place in my heart for the game, and I'm sure that it'll show as we move forward. This retrospective is my love letter to a video game that helped to shape me into the person that I am today. This may be the shortest introduction that I've written in a long time, but even now, I have a feeling that this will be far from the shortest game retrospective. So with that said, I'm the Unhinged Gamer, and this is my Final Fantasy VIII retrospective. After the juggernaut that was Final Fantasy VII, Squaresoft was left with a monumental task ahead of them. See, 7 had been a success the likes of which they had never seen before. There's an argument to make that Final Fantasy VII is the reason for the rise of the JRPG genre in the US, as well as establishing PlayStation as the home for RPGs in that generation. Final Fantasy VIII would be the next chapter, and despite being the follow-up, production had already started during the English translation of Final Fantasy VII. This was the first game to have a very hands-off approach from series creator Hironobu Sakaguchi, who was busy working with Square's first big foray into the film industry with Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within. And the less said about that, the better. Anyways, back to the game. This left Final Fantasy VIII in the hands of Yoshinori Kitase as the director, with Shinji Hashimoto as the producer in this one, which was the role that Sakaguchi had filled during the making of Final Fantasy VII. The team knew that they had to build upon everything that they had accomplished with VII, and that left them with some big choices to make. This would be the first game in the series to feature a realistic character design, straying away from the blocky characters of VII in favor of characters with anatomy that was much closer to that of actual people. The game adopted a much more muted and down-to-earth color palette as well, grounding it with a much more realistic visual style. While the series was known for its high fantasy worlds with kings, knights, mages, princesses, and the like, VII pulled the series into a more modern direction with Shinra, and now with Final Fantasy VIII, the world was made to be even more realistic, with nothing even hinting at special classes. Magic, for example, was not something innate to only a few. Okay, well, technically it was, but we'll get into that later. And instead of rulers being kings, or as in VII, a world-controlling conglomerate corporation, there was political strife in Final Fantasy VIII. The cities were more emblematic of nations, with their own leaders and their issues amongst each other. And in that world existed an organization of highly trained mercenaries, trained in academies called gardens. This was still a fantasy game at heart, but made to feel much more real than the previous entries. Final Fantasy VIII is also one of the most controversial and maligned games in the mainline series. There are many people who say that the story is a nightmare to understand, saying that it's barely held together, and in some places it just feels like it was made up as they went along. Now there is a ton of criticism for the new combat system as well, the Junction system, with many critics complaining that the game can be broken or saying that the system is just too complicated. Now, despite the criticism lobbied against the game, upon its release, Final Fantasy VIII received widespread critical acclaim, with many 9 out of 10 scores to its credit. Electronic Gaming Monthly awarded it with the Reader's Choice Game of the Year, with Hyper awarding it as the best role-playing game, and the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences naming it the Console Adventure / Role-Playing Game of the Year, as well as giving awards for Outstanding Achievement in Animation and Outstanding Achievement in Art Direction. But despite the high praise for the game on its release, time has been less kind. Several reviewers here on YouTube alone have torn into the game, picking apart the things that they dislike, and there's a general feeling among many that the game was a letdown. But as someone who's played it countless times and grew up with this game, I have to disagree with most of the complaints about it. And that's why this video is even happening, because I feel that I can offer a different opinion, throwing my voice out into the ether and giving a unique perspective of the game. Now with all that out of the way, let's jump into the world of Final Fantasy VIII. The game opens up on a beach, with Liberi Fatale playing as the waves crash onto the sand. We then rush forward with a very cryptic message foreshadowing the events of the game as we see some of the key players. Squall's image fades into Renoa as a promise is made. The moment where a feather flies into the air to come spinning down as Squall's gunblade is absolutely incredible. The sorceress shows up on screen as the title flashes, and then we're shown a battle between Squall Leonhart and Cypher Almasy. The game shows us scenes of the sorceress and Rinoa before cutting back to the intense battle. The two are evenly matched, with Squall throwing a barrage of attacks before being blasted by fire. Cypher takes a vicious swing, scarring Squall's face, before Squall retaliates with a slash of his own, and then we go to a scene of Squall moving to embrace Rinoa, before fading out. This opening cutscene sets the tone for what to expect, and is arguably one of the greatest video game opening scenes ever. Afterward, we're taken to the infirmary where Squall's being treated for the gash Cypher left on his face. Their epic battle was simply a sparring match, showing us just how serious both of these young men are about being the best. We then see a young woman coming to visit Squall, but she takes off before we can speak with her. From there, the doctor and Quistis come into the room. Squall is basically fine, but the cut will leave a scar. Quistis is there because Squall was supposed to have taken a field test, and thanks to his spar with Cypher, he was behind and now has to get it done. Quistis is only a little older than Cloud, but she's also an instructor here. You're in Galbadia Garden, a military academy that trains young men and women to become soldiers, members of an elite mercenary organization known as VIII. The Seeds are sent all over the world as mercenaries, and this brings in quite a bit of money for the garden. Quistis escorts Squall to the classroom for their homeroom and addresses his battle with Cypher, accosting Cypher for being way too rough in the training. The big field exam is today, and Quistis pulls Squall aside after homeroom to let him know that he has to pass the prerequisite in order to take part today. Squall has to go with Quistis to the Fire Cavern, and this is where we first hear about one of the biggest changes to the Final Fantasy formula, as summons are now known as Guardian Forces, which leads us to discussing one of the most controversial parts of this game, the Junction system. The Junction system is a new combat system that totally reimagines the way we look at summons and magic in general. Final Fantasy VII changed the game with materia that could be interchanged from party members, but Junctioning took things to another level. And here are the basics. You equip or junction a Guardian Force, also known as a GF, to a character that allows you to start customizing that character build. Without them, you can only attack. Once you've junctioned the GF, you can equip the basics of magic, GF/summon, and items, as well as the draw ability. And this is extremely important. There is no materia here. There are no mages. Anyone can learn magic with the help of GFs. And it doesn't even matter what level you are. You can cast any spell that you can draw, but there's a catch. Spells are disposable. So spells are essentially items for each individual character. You can carry 100 of each spell that you learn. The kicker is that as your GFs learn more abilities, you can junction magic to your attributes, raising damage, health, resistance, you name it, junctioning handles it. This allows you to break the game, as some may say. Many people consider this to be a huge issue in the game, saying that it was a mistake on the part of the development team, or that it was an overly complicated system, and maybe to some people it is, but it's one of my favorite aspects of this game. It feels awesome when you can equip a high-level spell to your attack and one-shot almost any enemy, including bosses. And it's not that difficult to do. You can simply click the attribute that you want the junction to, and just scroll through your spells, and it will show you what spells impact things in different ways. So with just a few minutes of looking through, you can optimize your characters to become forces of total destruction. And one thing I didn't even realize during my first few plays in the game, but the enemies here also scale to your level. So grinding is actually discouraged in that sense. But that just makes the junctioning system even more impressive. If you want the challenge, just keep grinding levels like in any other RPGs, and the enemies will stay competitive as you junction. But if you want to just explore this game and experience the story, this game allows you to break your power wide open and to get rid of random battles. And that's right, 0 random encounters is a possibility in this game. You can just play through the story and enjoy it with only having to face the mandatory story bosses. Now, I know that that's why some people would argue that this game is so broken, but I believe that this was all set up this way intentionally so that anybody can beat this game and experience it. They wanted players to dive into these systems and embrace them. I know the whole complaint that it pushes players to not cast their magic, but the attacks alone in this game, especially squalls, are pretty cool, so for me at least, I'll cast a few to see how they look, but I prefer to just smash the enemies with physical attacks anyways, especially when they're this effective. And now, to further address this system, the draw mechanic. This allows players to draw out spells from enemies. You can also draw some GFs from bosses as you go, but the idea is that the more you draw, the more spells you have. The more spells you have, the better they improve your junctions. So, the more they improve your junctions, the more easily you smash through the game. And while drawing can be tedious, I believe that it's not that different from just level grinding in other games. Also, there are other ways that it still may be tedious, but are much more fun to build yourself up and to break the battle system, as they say. On your way out of the classroom, one of the other students will give Squall a small set of cards for one of the greatest mini-games in Final Fantasy history, Triple Triad. The game is simple enough that anybody can jump in and get playing. You use 5 cards to play on a 9-tile grid. Each side of the card has a number representing its power, as well as various effects that can impact the game. But the idea is higher numbers can take lower numbers. It's simple and addictive, and the amount of NPCs who play means that you can play this game just about anywhere you go. Just keep in mind that different regions do have different rules. But the reason I bring this up now is that with the right GF ability, Card Mod, you can turn cards into rare items. And with other GF abilities, you can turn your items into powerful magic, often in bulk. So, while you can just draw over and over from every enemy, you can also play Triple Triad and rack up a surplus of cards before using GF abilities to turn them into powerful magic that can send your junctioning into overdrive. Call it broken if you like, but the detail put into this makes me believe that it was absolutely intentional. And the biggest reason is this. Taking time to understand these systems lets you adjust your difficulty for this game, making it potentially the easiest game in the entire franchise. Squaresoft wanted you to experience the story. They wanted you to experience the world, and with just a little bit of work, anybody can beat this game and experience the story that they wanted to craft. And boy oh boy, did they ever craft a story. you depart for the fire cavern, which isn't far at all from the garden. 2 members of the faculty are there, and they let you choose a time limit for your test. Now this will impact your rankings. The cavern is filled with bombs and bats for the most part. No real challenges. But at the end is Ifrit, a fire demon and the next guardian force for you to obtain. Thankfully, you've already got Shiva, who is an ice elemental guardian force that does massive damage to Ifrit. He even declares his total dismay that you have Shiva, and once he goes down, he offers to join you. Then you just need to head back outside and back to garden. Quistis will give you more instruction then on the Junction system before you're sent to go get changed for the big field exam. Once you're changed and head back to the lobby, Quistis introduces you to your squad for the exam. First, you get to meet Zell, a hot-headed fighter who uses fighting game combos for his limit attacks. He's full of energy and can be a bit overbearing, but he is excited to be teaming with Squall. And then you find out that the squad leader is Cypher. Zell is furious and Squall seems oddly indifferent. Cypher walks up with his 2 cohorts, Raijin and Fujin. These 2 are odd. Fujin speaks in one-word statements, shouted out, and Raijin, well, he's different, you know, ending everything he says with, you know. After Cypher antagonizes Zell, the headmaster of the garden walks out and we're introduced to Sid Kramer. Keeping the tradition of every Final Fantasy game having its own Sid, even with the oldest games being retconned to include Sids. And after he gives a speech, the party gets into a car and heads to Balam. On the way, Zell asks to see Squall's gunblade, and Squall of course declines as Cypher mocks Zell. Squall then asks Quistis if she saw the girl who visited him in the infirmary, and she of course didn't. Just small things to keep that plate spinning for now. The car will drive right through Balam and down to the docks, letting the party disembark before going to the next stage of their mission, boarding a ship to head out to their destination. Things are pretty quiet starting out. Another member of Seed, Sue, tells us about the mission, laying out where they're going and what the goal is as they travel. Squall then heads up top to get a look at what's going on, leading to another incredible cutscene. The forces of Seed are on their way to Dollet, seeing several ships about to storm the beach. Watching them plowing forward and landing as the cutscene blends seamlessly back into gameplay, with Seed rushing out onto the beach. You battle your way through Dollet, gaining control of the town square from Galbadian forces. And then you're left to hold the position. That's really it. You're told to stand by. All 3 are clearly upset with this, able to hear fighting in other areas, but holding this position is deemed important. That is, until Cypher decides that he can't take any more waiting. They see a few Galbadian troops sneaking off into the mountains, and Cypher gives the command to follow them and head to the tower at the top of the hill. Zell initially refuses, before being called a Boy Scout, with Squall resigning himself to follow the squad leader's orders, heading out of the city. There are Dollet troops injured along the way, and a monster takes one of them before attacking the party. Cypher demands that he gets the finishing blow for the experience, and given what we know about the leveling system, I would be happy to give it to him. But I can instead turn the creature into a card, ensuring that none of us get any experience, which is just a small win for me against Cypher for being such a jerk. Now from there, we head up to the top where Cypher starts telling us about his dream. He doesn't go into detail, but it's clear that he has something driving him. He takes off for the tower, running ahead as another garden student comes stumbling over the hill after you. This is where we meet Selphie, a new student transferred recently from Trabia Garden. She's there to deliver an important order to the squad leader, but Cypher runs off ahead, and the party then has to jump down over the cliff and head into the tower to catch up with him. Now when they get to the top, Biggs and Wedge are there working on bringing the tower back online. Seeing them at the top of the tower only briefly brought flashbacks from the Sector 7 plate the first time I played through this game, making me feel a bit sad, but thankfully the game didn't give much time to linger. Now this is clearly not the same Biggs and Wedge, but these are two more character names who carry through the series to help tie the worlds together. You face the two, and just as you're about to finish them off, another monster known as Elverit shows up, and you've got to take it down, which lets you draw your fourth Guardian Force, Siren, from the monster. Now once Elverit is defeated, Selphie finally gets the chance to relay the important message to Cypher, which is that they're being called to evacuate back to the beach. Now, it's mildly frustrating that she got so caught up in what was going on that she didn't bother to tell us this any sooner, but that aloofness and her positive demeanor makes Selphie a charming character. And now with our orders given, we are on a mad dash back down to the beach. And as we're heading out, Biggs activates a mechanical nightmare to chase us down. We're making our way back down to the beach on a time limit, and every time this thing catches up, we're thrown back into a battle. Now, once you damage this thing enough, it'll shut down momentarily, allowing you to escape and keep retreating before it gets back onto the chase. This is an intense retreat, trying to get away from this thing as the clock is ticking. Also, it is possible to take this thing down completely, but I would highly recommend not doing so, as it will deny you a truly awesome moment as the party hit the beach. This machine is close behind, and just as Glom is leaping for the departing ship, Quistis has a badass moment taking it down before we head back to Balam. We've completed our field exam, and now we just have to wait and see how we did. Back at the garden, everyone splits up as we have nothing to do but wait on the test results. Squall makes his way back inside and sees that Sid is giving a rundown of what has come from the mission. He asks Squall how it felt to be on the battlefield before Squall heads off. When he heads towards the library, Squall runs into Cypher, who looks distraught. He was rather upset about how things went down, and the withdrawal order had really gotten under his skin. Quistis and Sue accost Cypher, and Sid even walks up as Cypher is visibly shaking. Sid lets him know that he does understand to some extent why he's feeling the way he is, and why he made the decisions he made but Cypher will still be punished for his actions. A faculty member lets you know that they withdrew because Dollet didn't pay more money, showing just how callous Garden can be. Squall is then sent up to wait on the second floor for the results to come in. There are several students upstairs waiting before Zell and Squall are called to the third floor. Out of all the students who were there, only 4 students made it into seed: Squall, Zell, Selfie, and Nita, a student who we hadn't met yet. After a word from Sid, you're dismissed, now full-fledged members of Seed. You are then shown your test results and your seed rank, which actually matters because in this game, the random monsters don't carry around Gil. Instead, as a member of Seed, you earn a salary, and your rank dictates how much you earn. I personally always welcome this change. You're doing a job and you're being paid for it. It makes sense. And you can also impact your rating based on combat choices, decisions that you make in the game, and by taking Seed written exams in your menu screen. Now this will reward you for knowing more about the game, which is a really cool concept, tying right back to my initial theory that with all the different systems that play in Final Fantasy VIII, the developers really want you to dive in and learn and embrace and understand these systems. Once you've looked over your seed report, you head down to the second floor where Cypher is waiting with everyone, waiting on you. And after a moment of silence, he starts to applaud you for making it into seed. Now this is such a humanizing moment for Cypher. He's no doubt a jerk, but he's not wholly a bad guy. He's just very stubborn and extremely passionate. It's a touching moment for sure, but now it's time for the big seed celebration. Squall changes into his new seed uniform and heads down to the ball after some coaxing from Selfie. Now when you're there, Squall stays off by himself, sipping a drink and watching from the sidelines. It made me think back to dances in high school and being one of those who would stay off by myself. I didn't want to risk being made to look foolish, so afraid to deal with any rejection or embarrassment. But then, a girl approaches Squall. She seems to be his opposite. Squall is quiet and reserved, and she's bold and outgoing, flirting with Squall before outright dragging him out onto the dance floor. And this is where we get one of the most famous scenes in the game. Squall has 2 left feet out there at first on the dance floor, so clearly nervous and uncomfortable. The 2 even bump into other dancers. I still want to duck my head a bit when I watch this scene, being able to imagine how embarrassed he felt. And when he tries to storm off, I totally feel for him. But this mystery girl doesn't let him. Instead, she makes him keep going and try again. Once he's been reassured by her, Squall comes out of his shell a little and shows that he's actually a good dancer. But just as they start to have a real moment, something or someone catches the girl's eye and she rushes off, leaving Squall there on the dance floor alone. I feel for Squall in that moment. Literally moments after coming a little bit out of his shell, the girl who got him to do so just rushes off and leaves him there. and I firmly believe that the rejection from that impacts the rest of this evening's happenings for him. Squall walks out onto the balcony to be alone after this. And then, of course, he's approached by Quistis. It's pretty clear that she has feelings for Squall, but he seems to be in no mood to give her any time. She ends up giving him an order to meet her after the party outside of the training center. A little later on, Squall goes to meet with her, and she warns him about the monsters again before they head inside. There's a secret area there where students meet up after hours. The two head out to the secret area, and then Quistis opens up to Squall. Thanks to the events of the exam, she has been demoted and fired as an instructor, leaving her as just a regular seed member from now on. The total disregard for her leadership and her command is what led to this. Quistis, who is an overachiever who sets extremely high standards for herself, feels like a failure, and to make matters worse, Squall, who is still reeling from his own rejection earlier in the evening, is cold and callous in his response to her. Overall, this is just a very sad moment. The first time I played through this, I thought that Squall was just being so mean to her, and I couldn't understand what his problem was. Understanding why people would say that he's unlikable, but now, I think that while his actions were cruel, he's a kid. A troubled kid who just got left rejected in a room full of his peers right after he opened up the tiniest bit to someone. So I can at least kinda understand why he would be reluctant to allow himself to open up again at all here. Even if opening up would only mean showing some empathy. But I've been where he was. I have felt myself close up even more after feeling rejected. It's a terrible place to be, and this scene tells the old story. Hurt people hurt people. And the team at Square were bold in that they let the night end on such a bitter note, leaving both of them to ponder their failures alone. After the depressing exchange, the two head back out to leave the training center. But as they go, they hear a cry for help. The two run ahead and see the girl that had visited Squall in the infirmary is being attacked by monsters. Now they take the creatures down easy enough before she is tended to by two people in beige uniforms. One of them geniusly declaring that it's not safe where they are. They then take off with her, and we're no closer to understanding who she is than we were before. Quistis then tells Squall that it's not like everyone can get by on their own, which is a gentle plea for him to open up to others, specifically to open up to her. But he just doesn't get it. They then go their separate way for the night. The following morning, Selphie wakes Squall, telling him that they're going on their first seed mission, heading to Timber. Squall heads out the front gates where he meets up with Selphie, garden faculty, and Headmaster Sid. They're waiting on one more when Zell shows up on a hoverboard that is quickly confiscated. The three are being sent on a special assignment to Timber to help the resistance. That's really all that you're told before being sent out. The three head to Balam and board a train, and things take an odd turn. After you head to your room on the train, the three suddenly collapse, blacking out. We then awaken watching 3 Galbadian soldiers rushing through the forest. Laguna is the leader of the squad, a high-spirited goofball, and he's traveling with his friends and squad members Kiros and Ward. Once they get out of the forest, the 3 head back to Galbadia to celebrate the end of a mission. During the beginning of this scene, we see the confusion from the crew as they're basically watching this while trapped inside the minds of the 3 men, seeing things through their eyes. It's a jarring shift of scene and pacing for sure, but anyways, for now we've got no choice but to carry on and see what's going on with these 3. The 3 head to a bar in the basement of the large Galbadian hotel in Delling City. There, they enjoy a few drinks and it becomes pretty clear that they're regulars there, especially because of Laguna's infatuation with a performer there, a pianist named Julia. I always found this entire back and forth between Julia and Laguna to be sweet and charming. He desperately wants to meet her, but he's so shy, cramping up literally under the pressure. He tries to talk to her, but ends up instead limping back to the table with his friends. I felt so bad for Laguna here. I was a very shy kid myself and extremely awkward, especially around girls. And the anxiety of actually trying to talk to a girl? I don't know. I felt like I understood what's going on with Laguna here. I could imagine the pressure. And as he was sitting back at the table feeling embarrassed, the moment when Julia walked over and started to talk to Laguna, I think I felt my heart rate rising almost as fast as Laguna's must have been. I realize that may be cheesy, but again, I felt a deep connection with this game from the start. So even this early on, I was sucked in, and I could feel the panic as Kiros and Ward left him so he could talk with Julia. And when it cut back to see everyone in the bar watching them, I cracked up. The extra input from Squall here was also pretty amusing, seeing how he was clearly uncomfortable with what he was experiencing here. I got a big kick out of Kiros' comment on Laguna's gift of gab as well, as someone who's known to ramble myself. The conversation in the room was such a sincere conversation. They both were so awkward with each other, but in a charming way. And the fade where it came back to Laguna rambling about his life was a really nice touch here. He talks about his dreams and he rambles, so nervous and so caught up in everything that he is still standing as she's sitting there listening. I can only imagine his brain moving a mile a minute, unable to stop himself as he just keeps rambling on. Then Julia tells Laguna about her dream to be a singer. She's afraid to sing, but it's always been a dream of hers. Now back then, I was scared to death to sing. See, I'm a guitarist and playing in front of people has never bothered me. But even today, after singing in several bands, the idea of singing in front of people makes me so nervous. So back then, I took Laguna's encouragement to heart as well. The scene wraps with Laguna being called away for another mission. Then, the party wake back up. It becomes clear that they all 3 had the same dream, seeing it from the eyes of the 3 men. It's a really weird thing, like a group dream, and then Squall makes the right decision that the best thing they can do for now is just not worry about it. But I love the contrast from Selfie thinking Laguna was just so cool, as Squall thinks he was a moron. But they have a mission to worry about, and the train is about to reach their destination, Timber. Timber is a visually stunning town. The shades of green all over give a peaceful feeling. Now Timber is under Galbadian occupation, as is a good portion of the continent. As soon as you get off the train, you run into a member of the Resistance, Watts, and after giving him the code phrase, you board a small train and take off. Inside, you meet one of the leaders of the resistance, Zone. He and Watts act like high school buddies, not coming off like the resistance that they're supposed to be, and Squall is clearly unimpressed. They send him off to get their leader, calling her the princess. Squall heads to the back of the train into a pink room where he meets Renoa. She was the girl he danced with at the Seed celebration. She leaps up and hugs him, excited to see that Seed is there to finally help. Renoa asks about Cypher and tells you that he's the one who got her introduced to Sid. It's a bit awkward, the realization that the reason she ran off and left you on the dance floor was because of Cypher, but it is what it is. Renoa finally tells Squall her name before they head up to meet the others and get down to business. The resistance group, called the Forest Owls, then proceed to lay out a long and elaborate plan. They're going to use their train as well as a dummy train car that they constructed to kidnap the Galbadian president, Vinzer Deling. The plan isn't to hijack the train, nor is the plan to stop it. Instead, they plan to swap train cars and run away with the president so that they can force negotiations to free Timber. They lay the whole plan out in detail, and it's a doozy. They definitely were trying to be clever here when concocting this plan. From there, we get right into executing the plan, running up along the president's train and boarding it. Squall will put codes in to uncouple the train cars as they swap their dummy train, complete with a presidential dummy out for the real president. And once they get the train and run off to interrogate him, things fall apart. See, the Galbadians anticipated some sort of trouble, though certainly not to the degree of planning that the Owls used. And they had a body double, a monster planted to kill whoever tried to take out the president. After taking down the fake president, the resistance has to regroup at Timber to figure out their next move. They discovered that Galbadia plans to use the old broadcast TV station in Timber to make a huge announcement to the world. It's the reason that they were bringing the tower online from the seat exam. The Owls decide that they can get there first and announce Timber's independence on the TV for everyone to see, which I don't see how that will actually accomplish anything towards the goal, but the failed attempt and the Owls' reaction has Squall pretty upset, asking them to see the contract that they have with Garden. He then sees that Sid signed them to assist the Owls until Timber achieves its independence. Quite the task, and one that Squall sees less than likely to happen now. Angry, he insults them for their lack of organization. The party then head back to Timber and make their way towards the TV station. The city is on high alert now, of course, after the failed attempt to kidnap the president, showing that so far their plan has done far more harm than good. The crew make their way to the station building, and just outside of the station they see a massive TV screen showing static, talking about how the static has been an issue for years and they'd have to fix that in order to do any kind of broadcast. Squall and Renoa start to argue, and Renoa gets discouraged, abandoning her plan. Renoa tells Squall that it's sad they just follow orders, and this just sets him off. He questions how serious they really are, calling their operation into question, and I honestly think rightly so. Either way, Renoa gets upset and insists that they are serious before she runs off. The three then see the TV cut to the studio, set up for a presidential address. This is a big moment as it's the first broadcast of this type in 17 years. President Deling addresses the people, and his big announcement is to introduce Galbadia's new ambassador, the Sorceress. But before things can go any further, Cypher rushes onto the screen, taking the president hostage as Quistis chases after him onto the screen and calls for the three to come and help. They rush and confront Cypher and try to reason with him. Squall believes that Cypher's here because of his connection to Renoa. Quistis tells the crew that Cypher broke out of the disciplinary room, and Zell goes off, blabbing that they are from Garden, even as Squall tries desperately to shut him up. The president then smugly calls for them to release him now that he knows where they're from, leaving Garden in danger. Then Cypher takes the president away from that room before the sorceress arrives. She seems to be able to read Cypher's mind, getting in his head as she talks to him like a child. The sorceress then gets Cypher to release the president, who runs away before Cypher departs with the sorceress. As far as bad situations go, this is about as bad as you could imagine. The broadcast was still going on when everything went down, so now everyone knows that Garden was involved. The party leave the station and regroup at the home of another timber resistance group, the Forest Foxes. They discuss the situation about Cypher, and Renoa agrees that the likely reason he's there was to help her group. She pleads for them not to hate Cypher, as they hide out from the Galbadian military. The group are torn up now, Zell taking it really hard as he sulks in the corner, realizing that his big mouth could have doomed the entire garden. Renoa gets mad at Squall for how he's acting about the whole situation with Cypher, but Squall believes that it's likely that Cypher is already dead now, which, given what he did, makes a lot of sense. The group then leave town, knowing that they have to get out while they still have a chance. Watts is dressed in Galbadian soldier garb and helps the group to get onto the train out of the city. Their train base has been ransacked and wrecked by Galbadian forces, but the owls are safe. Zone is dressed as an old man to keep himself hidden as he gives everyone their tickets before realizing they're short a ticket, as he didn't account for Quistis. He ends up giving her his ticket so that they can all escape the city. They depart the train at a stop not far from their next destination, Galbadia Garden. They make their way towards the garden, heading into a familiar forest. Zell pleads with Squall as they enter the forest, desperate to be told things are going to be okay, but Squall's having none of it, answering him with the cold facts of the situation. Squall then gets accosted by Renoa, who urges him to try to comfort his friends, as Squall internalizes his thoughts rather than actually talking about them with everyone. And just as Renoa is getting really frustrated with him, 3 members of the party pass out again, back into the dream world. Selfie, Quistis, and Squall drop to the ground, leaving Zell and Renoa to watch over them. We are now back with Laguna, Kiros, and Ward. They are lost, thanks to Laguna's poor planning. We can see a large structure of some type in the background, and they decide to head that way, with not much else that they can do since Laguna brought the wrong map. All 3 have a really bad feeling about this, but they push on. They make their way into some sort of excavation site before being discovered by the enemy, soldiers from Esthar, which is a mysterious country that was at war with Galbadia. They fight their way into the site, trying to navigate the mysterious location as they head from an industrial structure into some green stone tunnels. Now, it's a beautiful area, but something does feel off about it. After some exploration, they'll find their way out onto a cliff overlooking the ocean. They're cornered by wave after wave of Esthar troops, taking them down until the final wave lash out, badly injuring both Kiros and Ward. Now they're both in really bad shape, and Ward's throat is injured, causing him to lose his voice. Laguna sees ships down below, and he has a great idea, tossing his friends down over the cliff into the water before falling and hitting his head hard as he tries to make his way down as well, badly injuring himself in the fall before we go back to the forest. They still have no idea what these dreams or visions are about, and again decide to just push through, heading through the forest and making their way to Galbadia Garden. But not before Rinoa apologizes for yelling at Squall. Galbadia Garden is every bit as impressive as Balam Garden. It's absolutely massive. The crew heads inside and are taken to a waiting room while Quistis goes to speak with the headmaster. Now shortly after, Quistis comes back in and tells them that the garden is safe, but that the sentence has already been carried out with Cypher. Everyone is stunned. They may not have liked him, well, aside from Rinoa, but he was their classmate. The group is devastated by the news. Squall internalizes his thoughts and gets trapped inside of them, frustrated with how everyone was speaking about Cypher in the past tense. Rinoa says that she thinks she was in love with Cypher, and tells about how they had met the year before. The whole situation, I think, made Squall think about his own life as he contemplates death and being a memory to others. The idea of mortality overwhelming him as he starts to get angry, because he then declares that he won't be spoken of in the past tense and charges out of the room before running into Raijin and Fujin. They both refuse to believe that Cypher is dead and tell Squall that they have new orders from Garden before they take off to go look for Cypher. The party regroup at the entrance of the garden and wait on further instruction. Rinoa then asks them if she can try to blend in as a member of Seed just to simplify things, which I think was possibly more because she wanted to fit in with them, or was afraid, for reasons that we will uncover soon. The Galbadian headmaster Martine tells the group that the two gardens have a joint operation to take out the sorceress. She has plans to use Galbadia Garden as her base, and they can't allow this to happen. So now, we're on an assassination mission, and for this, they need to have a sharpshooter. This is where we introduce Irving Kinneas to the party. At this point, the party splits into two groups of three and heads for Delling City. Inside of the city, the party tries to meet up with their contact for the mission, General Caraway. But they're first sent out to the Tomb of the Unknown King to retrieve a code from a student who was sent there a day before and hasn't returned. The soldier just assuming that the student was still there, which is rather morbid when you think about it. Now, when you get there, you can get to the code straight away, but it's also a good idea to explore and take on two Minotaurs. Sacred and, well, Minotaur, and gain them as a guardian force. It's very much worth your time. Now once you have the code, you can give it to the guard and head into Caraway's mansion, gathering there in his office and left to wait. That's when Rinoa informs them casually that she lives there, and that means that the general is her father, so the daughter of Galbadia's top general is a freedom fighter for Timber. Shortly after Rinoa leaves the room, General Caraway comes in and informs everyone that Rinoa is not going to be involved since she isn't trained. He briefly addresses their issues before getting down to the mission at hand. A Squall is clearly conflicted by this revelation. He and the general are about to get into a heated conversation when Irving chimes in and calms everything down getting them to refocus on business. We then get to take a long walk with Caraway, learning that the sorcerer's name is Edea before he tells them about a huge parade celebration that's being planned. He then walks them through the assassination plan in detail. Now, it's not as complicated as the train heist, but it is clear that Rinoa and her father think alike when it comes to planning missions. The group are going to trap the sorceress, and then Irving will take her out from a distance. Now, this is an absolutely insane plan, but orders are orders. Unfortunately, despite the party being highly trained soldiers, they're still kids, and drama causes teens to do some pretty crazy things. Squall and Irving are separated into their own squad, with Quistis leading Zell and Selphie on the mission. Quistis' team is supposed to trap the sorceress inside the city's massive archway so that Irving can get his shot, which should be a red flag anyway, as the trap would certainly alert the sorceress. But there is a plan B, which is for Seed to charge in and attack the sorceress directly. After regrouping at Caraway's mansion, the teams are split up, and Squall and Irving take off. Now, as Quistis is about to lead her squad out, they run into Rinoa. She has a plan to capture the sorceress using an Odin bangle, a piece of jewelry made to shut down sorceress powers. And at this, Quistis has heard enough. She snaps at her, clearly in no mood to create some new plan. They have orders. Quistis leads the crew out as Rinoa sits on the floor and sulks. Squall and Irving then head to the rendezvous point outside of the gates where the sorceress will begin the parade. Their goal now is to just wait on their signal and head up to their perch. The crowd is already gathered outside. Back at the gate, Quistis is feeling bad for how she snapped at Rinoa. And instead of just dealing with it later, she decides that now is the perfect time to rush back to Caraway's mansion to speak with her. And this is where things start to crumble. Rinoa is already arguing with her father before Quistis and the team arrive. Caraway sets a time lock to go off to seal Rinoa in the room, but she understands what's happening and darts out. And then, with perfect timing, Quistis, Zell, and Selphie rush in to speak to her right before the doors lock behind them, trapping the three inside of the mansion. Remember, this is Seed, highly trained soldiers. This part of the story always makes me chuckle at just how ridiculous it is. It's like watching a TV sitcom where a string of bad luck events take place with perfect comedic timing. Now, we go to Rinoa, sneaking past the area where Squall and Irving are, and climbing up into the palace and sneaking into the sorceress's chamber. She has decided to take the Odin bangle there herself, wanting to prove that she can help too. She makes her way up to the upper level, slowly approaching the sorceress and offering her a gift. She moves in close before losing control of her body as the sorceress is able to read her mind and use her powers to effectively subdue Rinoa. The sorceress then seems to come to life, having been sitting there resting as she dominated Rinoa. Now, she takes control of Rinoa's mind, making her a puppet as she prepares to address the people of Galbadia. Seeing her rise up, Rinoa in a trance behind her as she prepares for her celebration was absolutely breathtaking back in 1999, and this scene still holds up. the sorceress has such a sinister aura about her. Rinoa is stumbling around behind her in a trance as she stands with the president. Sorceress Edea then addresses the cheering crowd. Not by rallying them together, but by belittling them and telling them how she despises them as they cheer her on, seemingly under her spell as well. Squall and Irving see Rinoa with her, but right now there's nothing they can do. They have to wait on the signal. Now, eventually, the president tries to intervene on the words of the sorceress, but for his troubles, she uses her power to take him out, leaving the president laying lifeless in a heap as she takes control over all of Galbadia. She then finishes her speech promising a new reign of terror before casually strolling past the body of the president as she heads back in to prepare for the start of the parade. Now, when she's about to head inside, the sorceress decides that she wants to cap off the festivities by sacrificing Rinoa, bringing two statues on the sides of the large archway gate to life to attack her. Seeing the attack, Irving urges Squall to rush to her aid, but Squall tells him that they can't do anything yet. There's no way to get to her without totally blowing the entire assassination attempt. Now, it's a tough call, but Squall seems to make the right choice here, knowing that they can't fail their mission. The stakes are just too high. The game then cuts back to Quistis and the crew, trying to find their way out of the room. Now, they eventually find a trap door that leads to the waterway under the city streets, running along trying to get back to the archway. As they start traveling, the parade commences, leading them through the sewers as they struggle to get back in time. The parade's moving now, revealing that Cypher is alive and well, standing tall, serving as the sorceress's knight. This gives Squall and Irving their chance to finally rush into the palace as the parade moves out of the gate. The visual of controlling them during this cutscene is pretty incredible. It was another flex for Square at the time. The two head up to where Rinoa is and take down the two creatures that are there trying to kill her. They manage to save Rinoa, who is visibly shaken by everything that's happened, clinging to Squall as she is terrified over what she just went through. Squall comforts her before they head up to their destination. Now, all they can do is wait. No idea how badly the entire mission has been jeopardized already. And it's here that Squall realizes that Irving is acting a bit strange. He steps over to him to check on him, being informed then by Irving that he can't go through with it. Things here just keep going from bad to worse. Back in the sewers, Quistis makes her way through, finally leading the squad up into the archway with just enough time to drop the steel gates down and trap the sorceress's parade float. While this is happening, Squall is pleading with Irving, trying to get him to agree to take the shot. He's cracked under the pressure. But thankfully, with some encouragement from Squall, he's able to take aim and fire a perfect shot. Unfortunately, the sorceress is on high alert and uses her magic to stop the bullet. Now with this, it's time to move to Plan B. Squall tells Irving and Rinoa to back him up before he leaps down from their perch and hijacks a car, rushing down the road and slamming into the steel gate. From there, he heads inside the gateway to confront Sorceress Edea. As he gets onto the parade float, he's faced against his rival, Cypher. The two have a duel, but thanks to our breaking the Junction system, we can make quick work of our rival. After Cypher falls, Sorceress Edea challenges us. At this point, Irving and Renoa catch up to Squall and the battle begins. The three have to defeat Edea, and they come pretty close before the Sorceress ends the game by attacking Squall with a powerful ice attack, piercing his shoulder and leaving him to fall to the street below as Renoa reaches for him. Seed has failed. Sorceress Edea survived, and now she has Galbadia at her disposal. And this is where the first disc of Final Fantasy VIII ends. This is an absolutely stellar first act for the game. Now, we've been going practically non-stop since waking up in the infirmary. Now, we have to move forward and see what is in store next. Disc 2 opens up in a new location. We are back with Laguna. He's approached by a young girl who tells him that someone's there to see him, and that the man is talking to Rain. Now, we don't know who that is yet either, but Laguna playfully warns the little girl that monsters will be after her. The two have a cute exchange before she runs off for Laguna to call out for her, alone. Laguna follows her downstairs. The wall of the house looks like it's been shot up, and he speaks to the two pictures, referring to them as Alone's parents. Now, the two are both in good spirits here, and it's a sad yet heartwarming moment. Laguna then leads the girl outside and watches the path for her to head from his place to their destination next door. When Laguna gets inside, Rain is chastising Alone. She and Laguna kid around with each other about getting in trouble before Quistis walks in. It's so peaceful here, wherever here is. A stark contrast from where we left off on Disc 1. Laguna then walks over to Quistis and greets his old friend, as the two and Rain have a conversation. We learn that Laguna had been badly injured on their escape last time. It's now a year later, and Laguna had been bedridden for 6 months following that escape. Rain took care of him as he healed up. Quistis tells Laguna that Ward never got his voice back, and he's working in the prison now. Laguna and Quistis sense the fairies, which is their way of understanding having the other people inside of their heads. They're somehow aware of you seeing things through their eyes, but they don't understand what's actually going on. During the conversation, Laguna asks Quistis about Julia, learning that she recorded a hit song called Eyes on Me. She wrote it about a long-lost love. She also got married to General Caraway. Her true love went off to war and never returned. She ended up falling for Caraway, and they were married. When Quistis asks if that means that she didn't wait on her true love to return, Laguna cuts him off and exclaims, "Who cares?" Laguna is just happy that she's happy, not eager to keep up this discussion. Now, it's pretty clear that he knows that the true love spoken about is him. He plays it as cool as he can, but there's clearly more going on in his mind. And as the player, we can now figure out that Julia is Renoa's mother. Alone chimes in saying something about Laguna and Rain, but Laguna cuts her off and suggests that it's time for him to go on his patrol of the town. Quistis agrees to escort him, and they head out through the town to patrol for monsters. During the patrol, it becomes clear that some people here really don't like Laguna. They see him as an outsider and as a Galbadian soldier, so they don't trust him. Rain, however, is loved by everyone here. This is Win Hill. The town is overrun with monsters, which Laguna takes out to keep the town safe. It's a beautiful village, probably the nicest in the game if you're a fan of small towns. Life seems simple here, and it's the most peaceful section of the game so far. Laguna and Kiros cover the entire village, and on the way back, Kiros asks if Laguna still wants to be a journalist. He has a job for him as a travel writer, but Laguna, who always wanted this for himself, just seems a bit uneasy about the idea, eventually asking if they can stay there a little longer. Kiros asks if he's afraid of losing Rain, and says that Laguna has changed. Laguna then, of course, dodges the conversation and run off. The two can then head back to Rain and Alone, finding the two upstairs. The two try to hide and listen in, as they see that the conversation is about Laguna. Rain complains about Laguna and rants about him, but through it all, there's this strong feeling that she's just trying to argue with herself. Alone suggests that the three of them being together as a family would be great, and Rain seems sad, saying that she believes that he wants to travel the world and he wouldn't want to live there in the town with her, getting frustrated as she speaks. She then sees Laguna as he pretends that he just got there. He gives his report on the monsters to Alone in a playful manner before talking to Rain about dinner. He and Kiros then head next door to wait on food. Once they get next door, Laguna opens up. He's afraid of losing Alone, afraid of losing Rain. It's clear that he loves the life that he has now and he desperately wants to protect it. Leaving this chapter with Laguna to wrap up in a very emotional moment. I can completely relate with Laguna here. When I was younger, I desperately wanted to leave my hometown and never look back. I wanted to travel the world, but as I got older, got married, had kids, my priorities changed. I only ever moved about 45 minutes from the place where I grew up, and I'm happy here. My dreams and desires have shifted. It's amazing how your goals and dreams will change when love gets involved. I don't regret not traveling. I wouldn't trade what I have for what I didn't pursue. Laguna is desperate to keep what he has here because it means more to him than anything else. We then wake up to see the party, minus Irving and Squall, in a prison cell. Zell is just waking up. He's the only one here who went through the dream world. But he didn't see Laguna. He was in Ward's mind, and was bored out of his mind. The four are left sitting up there pondering their fate as the game jumps to another room. Squall wakes up in a small cell. He has no wound and no idea where he is, only that they failed and were captured. We then see the cell that he is in being moved around the prison. They bring him up, and we get the first look at the size of this prison. This thing is massive. Then we cut back to the others as guards come in. They tell the group that their friend is being tortured and then assault Zell until Renoa screams for them to stop. The guards then ask for Rinoa and take her with them as Zell tries to stop them, only to be kicked again. These guards are complete jerks, acting like they're about to attack Quistis as well before Rinoa agrees to go with them. Now we cut back to Squall as Cypher toys with him, throwing him around the cell. Squall is clearly disoriented and in no shape to defend himself, being taken and shackled to a wall. Cypher's questioning him about Seed, the very organization that he failed to join. Squall is confused by the questioning at first, and Cypher has him blasted with an electrical current, using shocks to torture him. It's clear here that Cypher chose Squall to interrogate simply because of their rivalry. Cypher makes it clear that he sees himself as the hero here. He is the sorceress's knight, and Squall is the evil mercenary who tried to assassinate her. The scene ends with Cypher having the guard blast Squall again before cutting back to the others. We learn that there's an anti-magic field over the prison right now. A Moomba comes in carrying a tray and drops it, prompting a guard to attack the creature. Zell stops the guard this time and he takes off, possibly to get back up to deal with Zell. They try to help the Moomba, then we go back to the interrogation. There's a lot of back and forth going on here. Cypher is informed that the missiles are ready and tells Squall that they're going to destroy Balam Garden at Edea's orders. Then, they plan to hunt down every remaining seed and destroy them. Cypher is delusional here, believing somehow that he is the one in the right, possibly brainwashed, possibly just so excited to be living out his childhood dream of being a knight to a sorceress. Cypher leaves and Squall insults the guard, being electrocuted again until he passes out. The guard telling two Moombas to watch Squall before we go back to the others. They're trying to figure out how to escape, with a morbid suggestion being skinning the Moomba by Selfie, and it cracks me up every single time at just how chipper she was in this terrible idea. And then suddenly, Zell realizes that he doesn't need weapons because his fists are his weapons. And thanks to working here as ward, he knows his way around. The crew then pretend to be unconscious to lure a guard in, before Zell's able to knock the guard out and head off to get their weapons so that they can make a break for it. Now right here, I have to admit that I am still not a fan of this prison. The monstrous rooms make sense for what it is, but it feels so repetitive. Surprisingly, there are two guards out in the hall on another floor with the weapons just laying there, messing with them when Zell walks up. Now after dispatching the guards, he takes the weapons back, and we head to check on Squall. Squall is freed by the Moombas who keep calling out Laguna over and over. It's a short sequence before whiplash may be setting in as we go back to the others again. Seeing them all doing their best Power Ranger impersonations with their weapons, before they're approached by two guards. It's Biggs and Wedge, demoted after the tower fiasco. They are shocked to see Seed, but are eager to get revenge against the unarmed... well, never mind that. They know that they're in a bad spot, but go ahead and attack anyways, complaining about being demoted before you knock them out and move on. At this point, Biggs gets up just long enough to sound the alarm, putting the prison on high alert. The crew head from there to find and rescue Squall, following the Moombas. The alarm fortunately released the magic field as well. The party is able to make it to Squall, seeing him propped up against the wall, exhausted but standing now and ready to escape. It's crazy how the moment where Squall is reunited with the others just feels like he's their leader. Some people just naturally fit certain roles, and Squall finds himself in charge again. Now they use a lift to try to get out, with Zell lowering the others to ground level so they can clear the way before sending for him. But when they get there, they realize something is wrong. The ground level is underground. This is no ordinary prison. Zell tries to make his way down to the others and gets pinned down by the guards before Squall leaps into action, wiping out the warden and rescuing Zell. Now they have to get out of this prison, but before they can move, they're pinned down by gunfire. That is, until Irving comes back, taking out the soldiers and clearing a path for the others. He's there with Renoa, who promptly ends his attempt to look cool. She then lets the party know that Irving was just going to take her to her father under the general's instruction before she got him to come back with her to save the others. This is an odd situation, painting Irving in a bad light as he apologizes. But the important thing is, they're all together now and they need to get out. The party heads up, confused by what's going on, as they find that the upper or ground level was now elevated way into the air. This entire place is built on drill tunnels, and the entrance and exit are interchangeable so that they can raise or lower into the ground as needed to deal with any attempts to break in or break out. As you cross the platform, you realize that you're in the desert, and the prison starts to lower. The bridge sweeps away under your feet, leaving Squall to scurry, hanging off of the rail while they lower into the ground, just barely escaping. It's a wild scene as he seems to just barely make it as the sand kicks up, completely enveloping the screen. The party then escape with 2 vehicles out of the prison and go to regroup. Now once they're a little ways away, they stop and discuss what's going on. Galbadia is going to wipe out Trabia and Galbadia Gardens with missile attacks. They try to put together a plan on how to save them, but as they do, missiles are launched for Trabia. Selphie is devastated. All of her friends were there, and they had no way to warn them. The group are desperate now, knowing that they don't have much time. Squall places them into 2 teams, sending Selphie as the leader of the squad to go to the missile base as he heads back to warn Headmaster Sid about the incoming missiles. Time is the enemy here as both groups rush off. This isn't like anything that we've done so far. There's no money to be made, there's no job. This is the group doing what is right. They have to act. Squall and his crew hijack a train from Galbadian troops and head for Balam, as the guard tries to run and stop them, adding some much needed levity to this very heavy situation. And then we go back to check on Selphie. Selphie is driving her team to the missile base. They dress as Galbadian soldiers using outfits found in the vehicle, and they're let right in. Selphie shows that she can lead as she guides the team inside, not even sure what they can possibly do here to stop the missile launch. They head inside the base's main building, and we get one of the coolest and funkiest theme songs of the entire game as they infiltrate the base. The crew does what they can to help, adjusting the error ratio to the greatest margin of error possible. They create a good bit of chaos along the way as well, including a fun scene where Selphie resorts to just smashing the control board over and over until the power goes out in the entire building. They then end up giving up on the ruse, fighting their way through the building before trying to stop the launch and detonate the base. They think they have it, but after they split, a determined guard overrides them and reactivates the launch sequence. When the party try to leave, they're stopped by a Galbadian war machine, forced to do battle with it before seeing the base fire off the missiles. They failed to stop the launch, but they did everything they could. Now all they can do is reflect on their mission before the base self-destructs around the three, swallowing them up in the explosion. There's a moment of reflection as they realize that they're trapped inside the base, and the three are showing a ton of emotional maturity and strength as they seem so calm before this explosion. And it is a massive explosion, leaving us on a cliffhanger as we head back to Balam Garden. Squall and the crew head inside the garden, and it's utter chaos. The faculty are running around screaming for the head of Sid. Apparently there's a garden master, and the entire garden is split into two factions. Those siding with the headmaster, and those siding with the garden master. It's a mess. Squall is searching all over, desperate to find Sid, before finally discovering that he's still in his office. The whole Sid's in hiding thing being nothing more than a ruse to trick the faculty. Now Cloud can relay his message about the incoming missiles, and they can try to evacuate. Now Sid agrees, but says that he's going to stay and try one more thing. And thankfully, Squall insists on handling whatever this idea is that Sid has. Sid sends the group into the lower levels of the garden where nobody is supposed to be, and he sends them to find something that may help. It's incredible seeing this more industrial underbelly to the garden, like a peek into the history that's covered up by the shiny garden above. Eventually, Squall gets the relic to function, the garden coming to life as it rises up from the ground. Realizing now that this massive academy is essentially a traveling fortress, and they take off just in time, barely missing the missiles. I could only imagine the pressure that they were under here, trying to handle all of this insanity, knowing that they were likely missiles coming right at you. This just speaks volume to the bravery of these teens. And yes, we have to remember, these characters are teens. Shortly after saving the garden, you're approached by a faculty member who tells you that the garden master demands your presence. So now, we're heading to another basement layer to meet the garden master, who turns out to be Norg, a large, evil member of the Shumi tribe, who was the financial backer for Garden. See, Sid was not wealthy. He had to find a way to finance the garden, and Norg was his financial backer, or at least his top financial backer. It was Norg who came up with the idea of making money by turning the seed into mercenaries, and it was an effective strategy. When you get to the basement, Sid is walking away from Norg, screaming and cursing him hysterically before he realizes that you're there. Now, Sid's embarrassed to be seen this way, lamenting over ever going into business with Norg. Headmaster Sid then composes himself and asks Squall to come to his office before you head on over to meet the Garden Master. Norg is a massive member of the Shumi, which are one of the stranger races in the game anyways. He demands that you give him the report on the sorceress. Squall tells him a brief version of what's already happened, knowing that it's not going to be a good report. Norg interrupts and says that you were fooled, that Martine double-crossed him and sent you to do his dirty work. Norg says that the sorceress will try to take all the gardens and that Martine was hoping to place the blame on Norg if things went wrong. This is a very strange and uncomfortable conversation. The staff and Norg declare that they intend to turn Squall and his crew over to the sorceress as a peace offering. Squall snaps back at Norg as he gets fired up. Garden Master Norg then insists that the garden belongs to him solely, as he is the financial backer. He's furious that the students didn't side with him and deliver Sid's head on a platter like he demanded. He then drops a bombshell. Sid and Edea are married. The headmaster of the garden sent Squall and the others to assassinate his own wife. It's a huge plot twist, and before you can process it, Norg attacks. He uses his throne, machine, whatever it is, to try and destroy the party, but by this point, thanks to our junctioning, Cloud and the others are able to shred through Norg pretty easily. As he falls, Norg cries, throwing a pity party for himself, showing what a coward the Garden Master truly was. But now, the Garden Uprising is settled. Renoa is surprised by Squall's reaction to all this, but it's clear that Squall's overwhelmed, declaring that he's heading to talk to Sid to try and make sense of all of this. The party heads in to see Sid in the infirmary, where he apologizes. Squall gets confirmation about Edea and Sid's marriage, and says that it was Edea's dream to found Garden. Sid lets Squall know that Sid's job has always been to defeat the sorceress. Sid Kramer, the headmaster of Garden, founded this organization to take down any sorceress that caused trouble in the world, knowing full well that one day it could be used against the love of his life. He did it at her insistence. It really paints Sid into a bad situation. He's trying to make the most of the circumstances that he finds himself in, and it's hard to imagine the pressure he's under. After the conversation, Squall is asked to head to the second floor because a ship is here. He rushes out to find that the crew on board are wearing the same beige suits as the kids that he met back at the training center. They're also seeds, but they say they are Edea's seed, a special group that was raised by the sorceress Edea rather than Garden. It's a lot to process, and there's still a lot of questions unanswered, as they say that they're there for Alone. Now, we don't have time here to start putting things together as we go searching for the girl. Finding that the girl who was in the infirmary was Alone, and is the same Alone from Laguna's world. This makes it absolutely clear, in case it wasn't already, that the times that they're in Laguna's mind are in the past. Squall goes to the library and finds Alone sitting there. She seems happy to see him, but she's sad that he doesn't remember her. Alone then confirms that the Laguna dreams are in the past and that she was the one sending them back there, all in an attempt to change the past. Squall is confused and scared, staggering back and collapsing into a chair with his head down. Alone is then ushered away by Sue, approaching and whispering to Squall first, "You're my only hope," before she heads up to leave with Edea's seed on the ship. While this is happening, Squall reflects on his life and his situation. It's a somber scene. He's lost, trying to make sense of the world that seems to be rapidly changing around him. Squall just wants to feel like he's not alone. We then get the flashback that I opened the video with. Squall as a child, missing Sis, speaking more to himself than to her as he promises that he will be okay by himself. We then cut to Renoa approaching Squall in his room. She asks him to walk with her, just trying to be there for him. She can see the toll that everything is taking on him and is trying to cheer him up as best she can, but before they get very far into the walk, Sid comes over the intercom, starting to give a statement before he cuts off, realizing that the garden is about to crash. We then cut to the garden smashing into some windmills as an old fisherman watches on before running to safety. Sid then calls Squall to rush to his office. He tells Squall that they crashed at a town called Fisherman's Horizon, and Squall is sent to meet with the leadership there as an ambassador of Garden, sent out to try and apologize to the town. They head up to the second floor and speak with some of the citizens of Fisherman's Horizon, further referred to as FH, and they're told that this place has no tolerance for violence. They promise that they mean no harm, and then they move into the town, looking to speak with the mayor. The mayor lives in the center of the town and is less than polite to the members of Garden, only wanting to know how soon they can leave. He sees them as trouble because of their military training and believes in full pacifism. They believe that all situations can be solved without violence and only with discussion. Squall internally thinks that the idea would be nice even if it would be a bit boring. The mayor wants Garden gone as soon as possible because he believes that their presence alone will bring violence, and he's got a point. They evaded the missiles, but that doesn't mean that the hostilities are somehow over. Outside of the mayor's home, you can speak with former Galbadia Garden headmaster Martine. He's been kicked from the garden with no place else to go, and wound up here at FH. He looks defeated and just sits, staring out into the distance. As Squall is heading back to the garden, you hear cries that the Galbadian soldiers are here. The mayor's wife comes out and blames you for the Galbadian presence, before Mayor Dobie walks off to meet them, believing that he can talk them into leaving. Squall then takes off after the mayor, knowing that this pacifism is unlikely to get very far while dealing with a sorceress-led Galbadian military. Squall arrives just in time to see a soldier bullying the mayor, telling him that they're looking for Alone and believe that she could be hiding here. Mayor Dobie insists that he doesn't know who she is and pleads with the soldiers for them to just leave, as the soldier declares that they're going to torch the city, mocking the mayor before Squall, Renoa, and Quistis rush in to make the save. They dispatch the soldiers before their ironclad arrives. It's the same tank that Selphie and the others faced at the missile base. Squall can make short work of this thing before it falls back down into the ocean, with the inhabitants crawling up to escape. It's Selphie, Zell, and Irving. They somehow manage to get inside of this ironclad to survive the explosion, and they've been stuck operating the broken relic up until now. Squall seems genuinely happy to see them and is clearly relieved that they're alive. He may play tough, but he really does care. He lets them know that the garden is safe and has Renoa and Quistis take the others back to the garden. But Renoa sticks behind to talk to Squall. She was happy to see how he opened up and showed his emotions. Squall's happy to see them all safe, and Renoa refers to them as his friends, which seems to really stick in his mind. She then asks if he would have been as happy to see her had she been in their position. Squall is flustered by the question, not sure what to say, and he starts to blush, even if he denies it. Renoa gets a kick out of how he's acting with her, and it's a really sweet moment. Afterwards, Renoa runs off to catch up with the others, and Squall goes to talk with the mayor. He tries to explain their side to the mayor, wishing that he could see their side too. I've seen people say that Squall was condescending here, but I never got that feeling. I think he's trying his best to actually reach out to the mayor. Not to lecture him, but to explain their side of things. Now, if you disagree with me, that's absolutely fine, but for me, I felt like this was another sign of Squall, the kid who never says what's on his mind, starting to mature, trying to reach out to someone else that he doesn't see eye to eye with. And he even gives a salute, showing his respect to the mayor before departing. When Squall is near the garden, he runs into Irving, who was waiting to have a word with him. Irving lets him know that the mechanics from FH were working on repairing the garden, and then he asks if it would be okay if he were to request that the crew help with something else as well. Squall and Irving then head back to the garden before Irving asks Squall to talk to Selphie because he's kind of their leader, showing that they have all sort of taken to the idea of Squall as the one in charge and the one to turn to. Because here's the thing, it's clear that they trust him, and they see him as reliable. They then head down to the quad where they find Selphie. The garden stage was destroyed in all of the commotion, and Selphie is devastated. Squall tries to cheer her up, and it stuns her, assuming that she must really look depressed. Squall's a bit off-put by the statement, not quite getting how he is seen by the others. But Selphie does appreciate him and what he's trying to do. Now about that time, Squall is summoned up to Sid's office, and Irving tells Selphie that he plans to ask the FH crew to help rebuild the stage so that they can still have the garden festival. It's obvious here, if it wasn't already, that Irving cares deeply for Selphie and is doing his very best to be there for her. Back in the office, Squall gives his report to Sid and lets him know that the Galbadians are indeed searching for Alone, wondering to himself if her abilities are why the sorceress wants her. He informs Sid that the Galbadians were going to destroy Fisherman's horizon before they intervened. Sid believes that the sorceress won't stop until she finds Alone and insists that they have to take action now. He then makes an announcement to the entire garden, letting them know that the plan is now to take the fight to the sorceress before deciding that the garden needs a new leader. At this point, he assigns Squall to the role without giving him any notice. Squall's clearly not happy about this and is overwhelmed by the decision, as Sid tells him that it's his destiny, which, as a teen, with all the issues that he already has, this really causes Squall to freak out. That evening, back in his dorm room, Squall ponders the idea of life outside of Garden. He decides that it's too much to think about, realizing that all he can do is move forward and take on the sorceress as he tosses and turns trying to rest. Squall wonders how it must feel for Sid to be in this predicament as we cut away to the others all gathered on a stage outside the mayor's home. The crew are going to dedicate the garden festival to celebrate Squall's promotion to leader. They then decide that they're going to be musicians, which is odd enough. They have two songs that are mixed together and they try to pick the right pieces for the festival. Now, it's always off-putting as a musician to see so little thought put into people playing their instruments, but the game also never says that they aren't musically inclined already, so at least there's that. The two songs are drastically different, and for years I chose the wrong song without even knowing it. I mean, not that there's truly a wrong song, but the choice does alter the outcome of the festival. So this time, we go with the Irish jig and let each one pick their instruments. And once that's complete, we're ready to move on to the next part of the plan. But it is fun to see them all playing as Irving decides what's the right parts for each person in this arrangement. Now we jump back to that evening with Renoa in her white dress from the seed celebration, as she tries to get Squall to cheer up and go with her to the concert. He's reluctant at first, but he does agree to go with her. The two head up to Fisherman's Horizon, and Irving pulls Squall aside, letting him know that he found them a perfect place for the concert. Now, Squall finds this extremely cringy, but plays along for now. Then, it's time for them to head down for the concert. And given the pace that we've been going and the constant stress and battles, it's really nice that they included a break in the action like this to let us see more of a slice of life for Squall and the others. They reach the stage and the four begin the show. Squall and Renoa enjoy watching their friends performing on the stage before they head over to the spot that Irving had found for them. And just as he said, there's a dirty magazine there, which makes Squall groan before moving on to try and talk with Renoa. She talks with him about the promotion and his added responsibilities, discussing how they're all a bit worried about him. Renoa playfully mocks Squall and he throws his arm up in like a mock swing. And I've heard complaints that he tried to hit her, but I personally never thought that he was seriously trying to strike Renoa during any of my playthroughs. So if that was the intent, it did go right over my head. Now, for his trouble, she shoves him down onto the, I guess, solar panels, and they talk a bit. Squall finally starts to open up just a little bit more here with her, and she tells him that they all wish that he would. They want to be his friends, and he internalizes his concerns of opening up, afraid that if he lets them in, they'll end up leaving too. Squall is afraid of being alone again. It's a very real fear, especially as they are soldiers and there's always casualties of war. Throughout this whole scene, Renoa is trying to get Squall to open up and to live in the moment, instead of worrying too much about failure and the future. She insists that he think about her words, telling him that this could all end, so why not enjoy it while they have it? He finally tells her that he's afraid to have friends today who won't be there tomorrow, and she urges him that today is what's important. There are no guarantees for the future. They want to help him and they love him. That statement holds so much weight. This is the conversation that Squall has needed for most of his life. He's needed to understand that he doesn't have to be alone anymore. He has friends. He has people that he can rely on. Renoa asks him if he has dreams and goals, and he says that it's something he doesn't really want to talk about, which is a huge leap from the usual whatever that he would give. He then asks her about herself, showing an interest that he rarely does in others. And she too doesn't really want to talk about the future, but wants to focus on this moment, here with everyone, here with Squall. The scene wraps up with the others playing on the stage as things fade to black. Then we cut to Squall drifting to sleep and back to his childhood in his dreams, showing how his insecurities are coming further and further to the forefront of his mind, now that he's finally starting to address them. He's then called to meet at the bridge, waking up and heading up to see what's going on. The bridge has been rebuilt, and Nita, the student who had become a seed alongside Squall, is the new pilot of the garden. It's nice to see them bring him back to the game in a really important way, especially since way too often characters like him get mentioned and then totally dropped in these big massive stories. They do ask that you let Selphie rest for a bit, which is entirely understandable. She has been through a lot and still has not had the chance to truly sit down and process her grief from the Trabia strike. They ask Cloud if he can give a speech and he shuts that down hard, causing Rinoa to crack up. Now, we finally have control of the garden and you can travel to most places on the planet. It can move over land or sea, but can't cross mountains or climb steep coastlines. But it is nice to finally be in control of where you're going for a little bit, getting a good look at the world around you. And of course, the natural first place to head is back to check on Balam after the missile strike. Now, as I first approached the town, I remember feeling panic as Galbadia Garden was there too. I thought I must have messed up and expected a fight, but for some reason that I still don't understand, that doesn't happen here. Squall heads into the city and is stopped by a guard. Balam is locked down by Galbadia troops, and Squall's able to get in when he lies about having information on Elone. If Zell is with you, you can visit his mom and he will promise that he'll get rid of the Galbadians. But the important thing here is to find the captain. We don't even know at first who we're looking for, but we do get some clues. Sent on a chase through the entire town to find this mysterious captain. Finding whoever it is. And the one thing we do figure out pretty quick is that the captain is lazy. Now eventually, you figure out that it's Raijin, which means that the bigger boss, the commander, must be Fujin. Now, when you find Raijin, you chase him back to the hotel where he's kicked out by an intense Fujin, and then you battle Raijin. He and Fujin haven't so much sided with Galbadia, they've sided with Cypher, and that means that you're now enemies even though they seem to hold no ill will towards Squall. Now, once Raijin falls, you can head inside to confront Fujin, who is then joined by the already beaten down Raijin. The two will try to fight with you until you make it clear that they are beat. At that point, they signal a retreat and Galbadia departs from Balam to continue their search for Elone. But man, it is sad to see the state that they're in. The two are clinging to their friendship with Cypher, but don't seem to feel any of the reservation that he does about his path. They don't care about the sorceress. They don't care about Galbadia. They just care about their friend. And it's something that Squall does seem to really understand, letting them leave and choosing not to pursue them. This scene always makes me feel pretty sad because I can understand sticking with your friends. And it's clear that Squall feels bad for them. He's finally showing that he understands the importance of empathy. Now, back at the garden, Selphie asks if we can visit Trabia, which we of course agree. She loved Trabia Garden and had so many friends there. This is just the right thing to do for Selphie. Plus, Trabia Garden was a part of the larger network of Garden, so there's this connection to pull them all together. Checking on them is the right thing to do here, so we're headed north to see the damage. When the party get to Trabia, the place is in ruin. Selphie and the others scale the outer wall and head inside. They took a direct hit. She runs ahead, desperate to check on everyone, and it seems there's still many survivors of the strike, thankfully. They aren't letting this keep them down. Their spirits are still intact as they know that now they're focusing on how to rebuild. It's both sad and uplifting to see them all working together like this. Selphie actually seems rejuvenated by this visit, and as painful as it is, it's clear that Selphie needed this. And from here, we move on to one of the most discussed moments in this entire game, the basketball court scene. The rest of the crew head to the destroyed basketball court to wait on Selphie. There's a lot on everyone's minds as they know that they have to face the sorceress soon. Selphie eventually heads over and thanks them for taking her to Trabia, making it clear that she wants to get her revenge on the sorceress too. Then Rinoa asks if they have to fight. She seems scared. She's worried and she wants to find a way to settle things without fighting. But that idea seems impossible. Squall feels absolutely flustered by her words before Rinoa asks him to tell them all what he's thinking. Squall then voices his dismay at her sudden change in attitude, and Rinoa talks about how she feels like she's falling behind the others. They're all trained soldiers. She's not. She worries that she isn't up for all this, which is really understandable in the situation. The fear of losing any of them absolutely terrifies Rinoa. It's here that Irving speaks up. He understands the fear of losing someone you care about and tells her that that's why he fights. Then, he tells them all that when he was 4, he was in an orphanage. And things start to fall into place in a flashback. Irving talks about living there, running around with the other kids, and how one young girl stuck out to him. Then we see the young girl that he thought was so special, and we quickly realize that it was Selphie. She then interrupts, asking about the house, and as she does, Quistis speaks up as well, as they both realize that they lived there too, with Irving at the orphanage. Irving tells them that he knew as soon as he met them, and of course they want to know why he didn't speak up sooner. It's absolutely a good question and one that many critics of the game take issue with, because his answer is simple. They had forgotten. They didn't remember him, and he felt bad being the only one who remembered. This answer has left so many people angry and is seen as a huge flaw in the story, but I think that the answer is absolutely fitting with his character. Irving desperately doesn't want to feel dejected. I personally believe that Irving felt really sad that nobody else remembered him, so he just kept it to himself, not wanting to be that sad kid who reminds everyone that they used to know him. It's an awkward feeling when someone you believe you know has forgotten all about you. And given Irving's clear anxiety with pressure, as we've seen earlier throughout the story, the idea of being forgotten could have been enough for him to justify just pretending that they all just now met, just to avoid having to admit that he was forgotten by them. And if that's the case, that just makes me feel really bad for Irving. In the flashback, Zell then bursts in, chiming in and asking if they remember setting off fireworks, making it clear that he was there too. Before they leave the room, and a specter version of Squall walks into view, moving through the memory. Squall then runs into a younger version of himself before moving through the orphanage into another room. He's following his memory around as the young him is searching for someone named Sis. He eventually heads down to the beach with the others. Young Squall, again, searching for Sis. Squall then walks down to the beach where the others are gathered for fireworks. Child Zell then runs down and threatens to tell on the other kids before being called a crybaby. This is when Zell realized another truth. He was adopted. And before we can think about that, we realize that Cypher was there too, being the one who was taunting Zell, being a bully all the way back then too. Irving then tells them that the only one of the group who wasn't there before was Renoa, and then Squall confirms that he was there too. He stuck to himself a lot, waiting on Sis to come back or actively looking for her. He was traumatized by her disappearance, insisting that he would be okay even though he clearly wasn't. Squall reflecting back to himself that he didn't turn out okay at all, before piecing together that Sis was alone, realizing now how she knew them all. Zell shows his interest in helping alone, and this leads to the crew starting to think even more about how they got to where they are, wondering why they all forgot except Irving. As they're working to remember more about their time there, the question is still lingering. We learn a bit more about the characters here as they realize that their past has shaped their present. Irving then presents his theory. The memory loss is the price that they pay for using Guardian forces. He then talks about how the GF give great power, but they take something in return, being some of their long-term memories. Now I know that people hate this, but to me this makes a lot of sense. Losing long-term memories like childhood happens anyway. As we get older, we forget things. The game does leave vague hints to this earlier on, but they are missable, and I can understand how someone would find this out here and be totally blindsided. But you have to remember that this is Final Fantasy, with fantasy being the key word, so the idea of these powerful Guardian forces taking away memories isn't really that far-fetched. And in life, sometimes the answer for your big important questions is a letdown. So if you're looking for some bigger meaning, sometimes it just is what it is. The crew then discuss what to do about the Guardian forces if they cause this, and then Squall says that they should just do nothing. He makes it clear they need the power of the Guardian forces. They need to face the sorceress, and he'll pay the price of the GF to have the strength that he needs to defeat her. They discuss the need to protect those that they care for, and then Quistis asks about the matron. And they see her walk in and they notice something alarming. Irving tells them that the matron's name is Edea Kramer, Sorceress Edea. The rest of the party seems shocked at this revelation. Irving says that they may as well not try to think about why she changed into becoming the sorceress, because all that matters is, it is the reality. He reminds them that Seed and Garden were Edea's idea, and the goal is to fight the sorceress. This reframes so much. Irving shot at Edea. No wonder he felt so much pressure. And he couldn't talk to Squall because Squall didn't even remember him. He couldn't shoot the woman who raised him. It makes him a much more sympathetic character. Irving commits to fighting and staying true to who he is, agreeing to face Matron. He only brought this all to light now because he felt like everybody needed to know who they're really fighting. They needed to know the weight of what they were about to do. He didn't just randomly make this decision. This has weighed on him since they all met up at Galbadia Garden for the assassination mission. Irving makes it clear that he believes in fate and that this is unavoidable. They have to face her. This is where he is as a result of the choices that he's had to make, and he values the path that he's on. He chooses to be here. He values all of them, and he's thankful to be back with his childhood friends. This speech rallies them all together, They know that this is what they need to do. Squall then asks Rinoa what she wants to do. The rest of them are going to fight, and they want Rinoa with them, but they only want her to come if this is the path that she chooses for herself as well. After they leave Trabia Garden, they decide that they want to go back to the old orphanage and see if they can uncover any answers to what happened with Edea. And as they depart, Rinoa pulls Squall aside and agrees to go with them. And Squall tells her that he wishes they didn't have to fight. I've never really agreed with the hate that this scene gets. I think it's a really important scene that does drop a lot in the player's lap all at once. And I've listened to the ideas that others have on how they would have told the story. But this is a story that we have, and I choose to embrace it. It doesn't even seem that far-fetched to me. And in the context of a fantasy game where you summon magic from monsters and travel in a floating university, this just doesn't seem that far-fetched or that big of a problem to me. Now there are a couple places that I need to bring up before we move forward with the narrative. First, not far from the orphanage is the Sintra ruins. When you arrive there, you are called out by Odin. He's waiting for you. There's a timer and you have to solve some puzzles to reach him. This leads you up the tower, uncovering clues and solving the puzzle. This place is a relic from an age-long past, when Sintra was the world power. After you scale the tower and you get the code that you need to put in, you can make your way to Odin's chamber and he will challenge the party. This is a weird fight. Odin does not attack, letting the timer continue to run down. If you can defeat him in the time remaining, he'll join you. If not, he'll wipe the party out with one big attack. Odin is not like the other Guardian forces. He doesn't junction to you. Instead, Odin watches over you and will occasionally intervene on your behalf, rushing in and wiping out all of the enemies. And a lot of people insist that you should absolutely never get him before a specific battle on Disc 3, and I understand that. But I think it's fine to get him here, and I'll come back to that when it's narratively relevant. Odin is not the only reason to be here though. After you take him down and you no longer have a timer to worry about, you can start focusing on attracting another Guardian force. This area is swarming with Tonberries, small enemies that can dish out insane damage. If you keep engaging in battles with them, eventually their leader will show himself, the Tonberry King. He is a massive Tonberry and is not happy with you destroying his people. However, after besting the king, he will join you as a Guardian force. And he has some pretty useful shop abilities that will make acquiring items and such a whole lot easier as the game progresses. Now, we're done with the ruins, but before we head to the orphanage, let's take a detour to the far north. If you continue even further north past Trabia Garden, you'll eventually reach Shumi Village. Now remember, we met Ashumi already in Norg, but he seems more of an outlier as the Shumi here are extremely kind. Their village is deep underground, avoiding the frozen tundra above, which the only jarring thing is probably the sunlight down there. But again, Final Fantasy, so magic I suppose. You learn here that Laguna once spent time with the Shumi and made a great impression on them. So much in fact that they are building a statue to commemorate Laguna. The Shumi will also let you know that Laguna tried to teach Moombas how to speak. Oh, also, Moombas are an evolution of the Shumi. So at a certain point in their lives, they give up the ability to speak to become furries, I guess. Moving on, we meet the Elder, and he sends you on a fetch quest that has you touring their entire village before he gives you the gift of seeing his hand. It's an awkward yet somehow oddly sweet exchange. This place plays no narrative importance either to the world. It's just here. But it's a nice reprieve from the action that we've been engaging in, and a nice final stop before we head on to meet our fate. As you get close to Edea's orphanage, you'll see that Galbadia Garden is already there too, and they're waiting for you. This is it, the big battle that we've known is coming. Nita shows Squall the garden is there and asks him to give orders to everyone on what to do. Squall gets everyone in the garden ready for the oncoming battle and then regroups with the party. But Zell and Renoa are missing. They tell him that Zell is napping, which seems pretty strange. Hell, all three are acting really weird here. You choose your party, then you head down to the quad. The preparations for battle are being made. Students are in a panic as they all rush around to get to their posts. Squall heads down to the quad where Zell is helping to organize the students. Zell then pulls Squall aside and randomly asks him to borrow his ring. Squall is completely confused here and decides that he may as well just give it to him for now. Not really having time to think about this as there's clearly bigger things taking place. Zell then lets it slip that this is going to make Renoa happy, even further confusing Squall before they have to move forward with their preparations. Squall then heads back to the deck and they see that the Galbadia Garden is on a collision course with them. Squall says to move forward as Nita lets him know that Cypher is there with Galbadia. Cypher then gives the order to attack, launching several Galbadian soldiers on motorcycles through the air to attack Balam Garden. They land and havoc ensues as the battle for Garden officially begins. Galbadia rams into them violently, causing a part of the quad to break off, leaving Renoa hanging on for her life. Now they can't get to her and Zell and Selphie rush off to try and find some way to help Renoa. They rush to find Squall now and tell him what's going on, demanding that he help her. Squall is in a panic too, trying to stay calm even as things aren't looking good. He is in charge of the entire garden. Everyone's lives are under his command. Squall manages to keep his cool and give commands to the party, sending Zell to save Renoa and tells him to do whatever it takes as he rushes into the classroom where some of the younger children are. I can't even begin to imagine the stress that Squall is under here, but he's handling it like a true leader. He gets to the classroom just as Galbadian soldiers are breaking in through the window, and he manages to fend them off. He then tells the students there to take the kids somewhere safe, and he's called back to the bridge. Squall then runs into the doctor, who tries to rally him. Squall says that the situation looks really bad and decides that the only thing they can do now is a counterattack. He then tells Nita to ram into Galbadia Garden to give them an opening. Zell comes up and tells Squall that he couldn't save Renoa. She's still hanging there. At this point, Irving interjects and asks Squall to save Renoa as the others agree that they will lead the charge and he can catch up after rescuing her. Squall agrees and is about to head down before the doctor asks him to give a speech to the garden, saying that they need to hear from their leader. He reluctantly has to face one of his greatest fears now, and he does so brilliantly. I'll just let you read this and see how his speech plays out. After his speech, Squall heads down to rescue Rinoa. He has shown a deep level of maturity here, getting everyone to rally together under his leadership. With that, Nita rams into the garden, and the students of Balam charge into Galbadia Garden, taking the fight to them now, as Squall is on his way to save Rinoa. Now, as he's heading down, he's asked to find a missing child, and as he's doing so, a Galbadian soldier rushes in on a flying machine and attacks him. Squall manages to open a trap door and lure the enemy out through the exit, where he beats on the soldier until the soldier falls, letting Squall commandeer the machine and use it to rescue Rinoa. Now, it's best not to think about how long she hung on or how she managed to stay up with the impact of crashing into the other garden, but Squall saves her and brings her to safety, or at least to solid ground. The two then rush to the entrance of the Galbadia Garden, and when they get there, Rinoa tells Squall that she has his ring, asking about the creature on it. Then, oddly enough, Squall tells her it's a lion and its name is Griever. Squall is aware that everyone is trying to get the two of them together and forces a subject change as they focus now on the task at hand. The sorceress is waiting. The others are already inside waiting for you, and when you get there, you'll split up, heading through the garden in search of the sorceress. Galbadia was the largest of the three gardens, and it's easy to get lost here. But after enough exploration, you'll eventually run into Edea and Cypher. Cypher knows who Edea is and challenges them to another battle, making it clear that he sees himself as the good guy. He is the knight, and Seed are the evil beings out to kill his sorceress. Now, Cypher falls easily enough here, and afterward, Edea shows her disgust at his failure, calling Cypher worthless before retreating downstairs to the auditorium. Squall then rushes after her, and as they get inside, Edea bursts in from the ceiling and declares that all seed must perish as Cypher runs back in. He's broken, but he's not done yet. He demands to protect the sorceress, but he goes down even easier this time, further angering Edea. She uses powerful magic, but we've already broken the game by now, so it's not that hard for us to beat Sorceress Edea down. At the end of the battle, Cypher falls, and a blinding light overwhelms the room. A dazed Renoa kneels and whispers something to Cypher before collapsing, as Cypher gets up and walks away. It's a very surreal scene. Quistis rushes to Renoa, and the party hear a familiar voice. It's Edea, not speaking as the sorceress, but as Edea Kramer, as matron. She calls them all by name and says that she was waiting on this day to come, for them to save her. She then asks if Alone is safe, and if she protected her. But as wonderful as it is to have Edea back, Renoa is now unresponsive. The scene fades to black here, and this is where we remember that we're only on disc 2. Now it's time to move on to the third disc. Things open back up with Squall in his bed, unable to rest as he's worried about Renoa. He goes to see her in the infirmary where she appears to be in a coma. Quistis comes over the intercom telling Squall to head for the orphanage as he heads up to the deck. And with nothing else to do for now, they have no answers and Renoa is stable at least, so the party decides to head back to the orphanage and meet with Edea. The old orphanage is in ruins. When you head inside, Sid greets you, thanking Squall for his hard work and assuming that Squall is angry with him. He confesses as to why he didn't take the lead himself, being torn between the garden and his wife. And that's a pretty impossible place to be. Then he lets you go to meet Edea. She apologizes to Squall and everyone else, horrified at what has happened. She tells them all that they did wonderfully and that she's terrified by what's transpired. This is where we learn that Edea was possessed by Ultimecia, a powerful sorceress from the future, and Ultimecia is searching for Alone, wanting to use the girl's power. Edea had surrendered control to Ultimecia in hopes of saving Alone, and even now she's worried that Ultimecia may try to use her again, unsure if she has the power to stop her. She then brings up Sorceress Edea, the one-time ruler of the Kingdom of Esthar. She is certain that Galbadia has assumed that she was the recipient of Edea's powers, but says that that is not the case. Edea believes that Edea is still alive somewhere, and that Ultimecia is planning to use Edea now. Edea then warns that their combined powers, with Edea's evil nature on top of that, would make for the most terrifying of enemies. Edea then asks about Renoa, and Squall gives an update to them. Sid and Edea then start to talk with Squall as he's overwhelmed with emotions, and despite what they're saying, Squall is barely able to pay any attention, his thoughts constantly flooding back and focusing on Renoa, how they met, how he feels, wishing for another chance, wanting to save her. Zell shouts Squall back to reality, and then Squall says that they're going to let Garden know that they plan to find Alone and keep her from the sorceress, even snapping at Irving before he finally manages to calm himself down. Squall is a wreck here. They give an update to the garden before he heads to check on Renoa again. Here, Squall breaks down. He begs Rinoa to wake up and speak to him before collapsing at her side as he is sent back into the dream world of Laguna once again. Laguna is still with Kiros and has taken up an acting job in a movie. He has no experience in acting, but they needed the money. Laguna heads down for the scene and meets with the woman that's playing the sorceress. See, Laguna is playing a knight that's there to defend her from a dragon. Kiros is asked to play as the dragon and goes to put on the suit before a real red dragon appears. They then get into the filming and Laguna has a gunblade as his weapon. They're waiting on the dragon to show up, but the dragon that shows is clearly not Kiros. The director and the sorceress run off, leaving Laguna to fight the dragon alone. He holds his gunblade the same as Cypher does, and battles the dragon before running away after he stuns it. He then catches up with Kiros as the two defeat the dragon, saving the day. They then head up the mountain before noticing something massive floating in the distance as the scene fades. This time, however, Squall gets to converse a little bit with Elone. She's asleep and can't control her power now, unable to break the connection that she has with him, before pulling the two into a scene of Laguna speaking with Edea at the orphanage. They confirm that Elone is being sought after by Adele as a successor for her power. Even here, Squall can't stop thinking about Rinoa, his thoughts messing with Laguna's mind a bit, even as Squall is obsessing on how to save the girl. Elone tells Squall that they cannot change the past, and that she's tried but it doesn't work. She wanted to keep Laguna in Windhill with Rain, and apologizes as she has to go now. Squall then wakes at Rinoa's side, just wanting to hear her voice. And even now that Elone has told him that she can't change the past, he still wants to go back, believing that he can somehow change things, as he's now more desperate than ever to speak with Elone. Now even Squall has fallen into this trap, and I do feel bad for him, but I feel terrible for Elone. She has been hunted by people wanting to use her powers her entire life, and now, in his desperation, Squall has become just one more person hoping to use her for her powers. Squall then heads to the bridge and begins the search for the White Seed ship. Squall can head back again to speak with Edea, and she'll tell you that the crew like the Centra continent, but they don't like to stay in the same place for very long. Edea also gives you a letter that you can give to them so that they'll trust you. You can search over the ruined continent before eventually tracking down the ship. Now, we hope it's time to finally get some answers. Once you board the ship, Squall tells them that he's looking for Elone, and they seem a bit upset, asking you to leave. But of course, Squall is not giving up that easily. He follows the Seed leader before running into Zone and Watts. The two have been hiding out with Edea's Seed since being on the run from Galbadia following the attempted presidential capture. Zone asks about Rinoa, and when Squall tells him what happened, Zone completely freaks out, blowing up on Squall. It's an upsetting situation where he just makes things even worse. But again, this shows that Rinoa is someone that a lot of people really care a lot about. Back below deck, you can give the leader the letter and he starts to open up to you. They realize you were all raised by Edea, and Squall lets them know that Edea is finally back to herself. The leader lets you know that Alone is not on the ship anymore. Then we get a flashback as he explains what happened. Alone was popular on the ship, and they tried to hide from Galbadia, but that is no small task. The crew ended up cornered by the Galbadian ships before an Esthar ship arrived. The two larger forces began to battle before SR troops boarded the siege ship, trying to get them to all go with them to Esthar. The Seed refused, but Alone jumped ship and took off with them. Nobody saw it coming, and they haven't seen her since. But now, we know that Alone is in Esthar, a continent that has no real way to even enter. Well, there is one way. Esthar has been basically hidden away since the end of the Sorceress War, and nobody really knows what even happened. Now, if you travel around the continent, you won't find any way to get the garden into Esthar. You won't even see any landmarks inside the continent. The country has been basically impenetrable, except for one way in. The crew then head to Fisherman's Horizon. Now, once you get docked at Fisherman's Horizon, Squall makes a huge decision. He is the leader of Garden, but that doesn't matter to him anymore. All Squall cares about is Rinoa. He hopes desperately that Alone will reunite the two. He picks Rinoa up on his back and leaves everything and everyone else behind. Squall is willing to throw away everything else to save Rinoa. He doesn't even speak a word to anyone else, deciding to carry Rinoa along on the old train bridge, walking alone into Esthar. It's an insane decision to make, but it's the only way that he can see moving forward. They say people will do insane things for love, and this is a solid example of that. Squall reflects as he walks on how that he's changed. And playing through this section again now, with years of time to reflect, I believe that it was around this point in the game when I started to realize just how important Final Fantasy VIII was for me. Around the same time that I first played this game, I initially met the woman that is now my wife. We met online, and back then, she was just someone that I chatted with and tried to annoy because, yeah, I was that kid. Years later, she and I became close friends and real feelings had developed, but we still lived several states away. She was living in a really bad situation and didn't know how to get out. I was still living at home at the time and spoke with my mom about what was going on, and we made a plan. In January of 2007, we traveled for over 8 hours one way to pick her up from the place that she was staying at and brought her home to come and live with us. In the fall, the following year, she and I were married. Now on that drive down, I remember being so anxious. We were friends, we were super close, but we'd not even met before in person, so we had no way of really knowing how we'd actually get along once we were there in person. If things didn't go well, we would have even more issues to deal with. Squall wonders how the others feel about what he's done. Are they angry? Are they laughing at him? Even today, the idea of meeting online is looked at poorly by a lot of people. Back then, I wondered how the people at home would react. But while I had a lot of concerns, I never doubted that what we were doing was the right thing. I'm sure I'm going too deep into my own story here, but for me, I see all of this again whenever I play through this game. Because just like Squall, it didn't matter to me that what we were doing seemed crazy. It was what I had to do. and I'm so glad that I did. Squall confesses that he cares a lot about what others think of him, and that's why he never wanted to open up. He was afraid of being rejected for who he is. Growing up, and even now, I struggle with that same thing. I worry constantly that the people in my life who are kind to me are only that way out of obligation. I constantly wonder if anyone would actually care if I disappeared. I look at Squall and I see so much of myself. And opening up to others is so much harder than I even know how to explain. Squall gets so frustrated with himself for the way that he is, and now he's begun to open up and shares this secret only with the comatose Renoa before picking her up to continue the journey together. Now when Squall finally reaches land, he sees that Zell and Quistis are already there, and they're acting like it's the most casual thing in the world for them to be there. They tell him that they are escorting Edea. Apparently, they all departed on their own, and they've grown to understand Squall and knew what he was going to do. Edea is heading to Essar to seek help in ridding herself of her sorceress powers, or at the very least finding some way to safeguard herself against Ultimecia, which, given everything up to now, makes a lot of sense. Irving and Selphie are here too, having run ahead to scout. Selphie and Irving are a bit lost on what to do though. They went to scout ahead and couldn't find any sign of Esthar at all. Now, the party decide to depart and search for Esthar. In order to get moving forward, you have to get through a disturbingly pale valley, and it looks like it may be made up of some sort of salt deposit. But anyways, in the distance, you see what at first glance appears to be a glitch in the graphics, or if it's intentional, maybe an electrical storm. The party head into this weird valley, hoping that they can get into Esthar. There are skeletons of massive beasts here, a clear warning of the dangers that they could be facing. Now, eventually the party get to a cliff with seemingly nowhere to go. But something's wrong. The sky glitches again before a hole opens up in the sky. This is a totally surreal encounter as Squall finds an invisible ladder and climbs up into the hole. They then find themselves on an industrial platform, and if you mess with a panel there, you realize that all of the panels that you're seeing are camouflage panels, and the entire skyline that you saw was fake, made to hide something massive. You then have nothing else to do but to continue moving forward, finding yourselves on a massive platform that starts to move. Now you're in it now, you have no idea what's going on, and all you can do is wait and see. Squall is totally lost here, trying to stay strong despite the insane situation. You then reach a hallway and head along before moving onto another platform as the camouflage system drops to show you a massive futuristic city. Then, the platform that you're on moves onto rails and rushes you around the city heading towards the capital. After everything else that you've seen, this is somehow an absolutely breathtaking change for this world. This city makes Midgar look like a small town. But then, just as the party reach the end of the platforms, they collapse again back into Laguna's dream world. Ward's back with the group, and this time they are all captives in a massive Esthar building. The guards here are completely evil, abusing the prisoners. Eventually, Laguna, Kyros, and Ward make a break for it, busting out of the facility and running into a genius doctor named Dr. Odin. He's totally unaware of the breakout happening as he argues with his assistants. They're talking about the Lunatic Pandora, which is a massive weapon. It turns out that this is the large floating pillar that Laguna and Kiro saw before. They discuss Esthar kidnapping girls looking for a successor to Edea, and we see how Odin can be totally heartless. Once they get outside, you see the Lunatic Pandora behind them. That's what they've been working on. The prisoner with them and one of the assistants are members of a resistance wanting to overthrow the sorceress. The assistant brings up Alone, and Laguna demands to know where that she is before hearing that the prisoner wants Laguna to lead them. He seems oblivious to what's going on, but does promise to help once they rescue Alone. Laguna then heads down below and confronts Dr. Odin on the location of Alone, and takes down some more security guards as Odin tries to make a retreat. They chase the doctor out of the research center before he tells them where Alone is, and then he retreats back inside. Laguna then heads into Odin's lab to find Alone. Here, the two are finally reunited and they share a moment, showing Laguna's dedication to those he cares about before we wake up. And just as they do, a car pulls up. Edea takes charge here, dealing with the situation as they're all escorted deeper into the city to Odin's lab. The scale here is overwhelming. When they arrive, Odin asks if they want to see Alone, and Squall insists that they do. Odin agrees if he's allowed to examine Renoa. They're told to head to the Lunar Gate if they want to see Alone, and then they make their way out of the massive city. Now the Esthar continent looks like a wasteland. Everybody basically lives in the massive city, with the other places, including laboratories and such, over any smaller towns. It's an entirely different culture from everything in the Western world. The party heads to the Lunar Gate, where they are prepped to be sent to the lunar base. This is where the president of Esthar and Alone are both currently at. It's a strange building, but everything we've seen in Esthar is strange, so that's not a big shock. The staff then ask if you're sure you want to do this, and of course, there is no choice to make. Squall is going. Zell then asks if he can stay back and protect Edea, which is a really good choice, showing that Squall is learning to trust his friends. The crew headed for the base head into sleep pods that are to be transported as they are literally fired out of a cannon at the moon. This launch process always gets a reaction from me because it will never not seem totally insane. Again, they are fired out of cannons at the moon. Now, as soon as they take off, Angelo, which is Luna's pet dog, that I may not have mentioned before now, so if that's the case, I apologize. Anyways, Angelo takes off because something outside has alerted her. You run outside and you see that the Lunatic Pandora is on the move. This massive monolith had been sent to the bottom of the ocean years ago by Esthar, but has since been excavated by Galbadia, which is really bad news. The crew rush back to Esthar's capital and try to speak with Dr. Odin to find out what's going on. He shows them the points in the city where they can intercept the Lunatic Pandora on its current path. The crew take off into the city to intercept it, finding that the city's transports are all down, leaving them to travel on foot. It's not hard to get to the locations here. They wait on it to pass by before taking on a few Galbadian troops and heading inside. Now, we learn quickly that the interior of this is the same as the crystal cavern that Laguna and his crew went through when they were nearly killed by SR troops in one of the previous dream sequences. Now, no matter what you do, you'll eventually run into a massive machine that ejects your crew from the Lunatic Pandora as it continues to make its way to Tyr's Point, a location believed to amplify the effects of the massive monolith, which is capable of pulling down monsters from the moon to Earth in an event called a lunar cry. Zell did his best, but the thing managed to escape and is preparing something truly terrible. The lunar cry is an event that could wipe out an entire continent, but now we're going back to check on Squall and Rinoa in space. Now, at the lunar base, the capsules containing your party are brought on board. It is crazy to see how SR tackles their lunar travel, firing people out of a massive cannon only to catch them in some weird space nets. Now, this station is an impressive sight, and here in space is where Esthar have been keeping the imprisoned sorceress Edea. What could possibly go wrong? Rinoa is put into a medical pod to be examined, and the others head out to meet the president. When they get to the bridge, they see that the president is already out checking on Edea before Squall goes to meet up with Alone. He begs her to send him back, hoping that he can save Rinoa, and she tells him that she can only send people back into people that she knows. But she does agree to at least go see Rinoa and to try. On the way, they stop in the command center and you see terrifying red masses gathering all over the moon. The lunar cry is growing closer. Squall prepares to leave the room when Rinoa's pod opens and she gets out. But she's not herself, moving unnaturally and laying out anyone who gets close to her. Rinoa is unresponsive, as if on autopilot, and Squall tries to help, but he is slammed repeatedly into the walls, bouncing off of her every time he gets close. Rinoa heads to the command center and opens the first of two locks that are sealing Edea away before she puts on a spacesuit and heads out to where Edea is being kept to open the second seal. The station is on red alert, but no matter what Squall tries, he can't stop Rinoa. She frees Edea just as the lunar cry begins, seeing hordes of monsters sent down to flood over the Esthar continent. Sorceress Edea is brought down in the lunar cry as well, and is taken into the Lunatic Pandora by the Galbadians. Seeing this eruption of monsters to Earth is one of the most terrifying scenes I think I've ever seen in a Final Fantasy game. And as bad as it was, we've got more to worry about. The space station is in danger now, and we have to evacuate. But Squall still needs to get to Rinoa. She's still out in space, and he has no way to get to her. Squall begs Alone to take him back to Rinoa, and once they escape the space station, she does what she can, sending him back into Rinoa's past. They first go back to see Rinoa forcing Irving to turn back around and help the others escape the prison. Irving is confident that they can and will escape on their own, but Rinoa is just having none of it. Squall tells Alone that she went too far back and asks to see something more recent. We then cut to Rinoa talking to Zell about Squall's ring. She wants one like it, and Zell offers to make her one if they can get a hold of Squall's ring so we can check it out. It's a sweet scene, but it's still not what Squall needs to see. This time, we jump to Rinoa talking to Cypher after Edea was defeated. Squall realizes that it's not Rinoa, but instead it's Ultimecia controlling her. She tells Cypher to find the Lunatic Pandora or he will never get to dream again, sending him off on his mission before Rinoa collapses. Squall can hear Rinoa, trapped inside of herself, saying that she's scared, as he shouts, trying to get Ultimecia to leave Rinoa alone before they're taken back. Now they know what's happened to her, but Squall wasn't able to save her. Alone then gives it one more shot, showing Squall Rinoa's present situation. She is floating alone in space now. Ultimecia has left her, and she's completely helpless. Rinoa is left to ponder her life as the life support in her suit is running out. She is scared and is trying to come to accept her fate. During all of this, Squall tries desperately to speak with her as she's floating there. The scene goes on for an uncomfortably long time, seeing her floating lifelessly through space. Rinoa eventually sees Squall's ring floating in front of her and starts thinking about Squall, realizing that she's still alive as we cut back to Squall. He decides that he's going out there for her. He knows he's almost certainly going to die too if he does this, but he won't let her die alone. Squall departs the evacuation pod and heads out into the cold of space to be with Rinoa, catching her as she drifts towards him. This is a heartbreaking scene. The two can see the lunar cry still taking place, and they are helpless as they drift together, before Rinoa and Squall see a dragon-shaped spaceship floating towards them. It was an old Esthar ship, but was lost to space 17 years ago. The two manage to grab onto this ship and make their way inside, so they're safe for now. On board the ship known as the Ragnarok, Rinoa asks Squall for a big hug. She wants to know that she's still alive, but Squall reminds her that they're still far from safe. They don't know how to get home, and to make matters worse, this entire ship has been overrun with alien monsters that have to be taken out in color-coded pairs. Now, once the colorful creatures are defeated, you can reach the control room where you hear a voice being transmitted. It's Esthar, and they're going to help guide the ship back to Earth. You've been saved. Rinoa moves to sit on Squall's lap, desperate to be held by him. This is one of those pivotal moments for me in Final Fantasy VIII. The two are open with each other. Squall is afraid of what comes next. Rinoa just wants to share this moment with him. She asks him about what happens when they get back, wanting him to say that they'll be together, but he's either too oblivious or too afraid to admit it. Rinoa is worried about being hated now. The Esthar crew speak with you and find out who is on the ship. This is where it's confirmed that Rinoa is now a sorceress. She took Edea's powers when they defeated her. Renoa is informed that Esthar will take her into custody when they land, and she tells Squall that she's scared. He then rushes from his seat to her side, kneeling next to her and holding her tight in a scene that still makes me tear up watching it all these years later. Squall confesses to himself that he has fallen for Renoa before they are met by the Esthar crew, who take her away with them. They tell the two that Ultimecia wants to achieve time compression, turning every moment into one solitary moment and freezing it, giving her eternal life and control over the entire planet. Renoa tells them that she's ready and offers to give Squall back his ring before he tells her to keep it. Renoa then leaves as Squall heads back to the Ragnarok and sits down, trying to come to terms with what just happened. This is the most depressing point of the entire game. Now, as soon as Squall goes to sit down and think, Quistis runs in. A lot has happened already. She asks Squall about Renoa, and before he can answer, Zell and the others run in. They're all excited, and Zell starts to tell Squall what's been going on, telling him about Edea no longer being a sorceress and talking about Galbadia having the Lunatic Pandora. But as he's telling Squall about the Lunar Cry, Squall tells him that he's had enough. He's got too much on his mind to think. This is where he tells them that Renoa is the new sorceress and she's gone with the Astarians to be sealed. He lets them know that this was Renoa's decision and about her fears. At this point, Quistis jumps him for not stopping her. She calls Squall a fool, and this gets him thinking. He starts to realize then just what he's done, and he decides to go back and rescue her once more, realizing that he has made a huge mistake. Selphie takes off in the pilot seat of the Ragnarok, and they head off. Squall tells her where to go, and the crew rush off to the Sorceress Memorial to save Renoa once again. I can only imagine the pressure Squall's under here. He knows the responsible thing is to let her be sealed away. Her powers are dangerous, and Ultimecia could use her again. The right decision for the world is to let her be sealed, but it's not the right decision for him. Squall didn't go through all the hell that he's been through just to lose Renoa like this. The crew arrive at the Sorceress Memorial and are allowed in by the guards, assuming that they're there to see their friend off. Once inside, Squall tells the engineers that he's going to do what he should have done before. The party then get hostile, making it clear their intentions. Squall rushes in to where they're sealing Renoa and in a panic, slices into the sealing device. This causes it to shut down and freeze Renoa, who rushes into Squall's arms. And the way the two of them hold each other here speaks more than I ever could about who they are to each other. Renoa tries to argue with Squall that she's dangerous, but he tells her that he doesn't care, pulling her in tight before they head out. They're ready to fight the Galbadian soldiers on the way out before a massive man comes up and waves them off. He then gives the signal for the party to go, which Squall is certain that he's seen this man before, and it's pretty obvious who it is. Now once they get on the ship, Renoa is still not sure how to feel. She's worried about how people will see her, but she's happy that her friends cared enough to come and rescue her. The crew discuss where to go next, and then they start discussing their options. Renoa asks if they can go back to the orphanage. She doesn't want to be near large groups of people, which, given her situation now, is totally understandable. So they depart in the Ragnarok, which is possibly the coolest airship in the entire series. And while, yeah, there's more that we could do, for now, let's go ahead and run back to the orphanage. When we get there, Rinoa and Squall head out to a large meadow full of flowers, and Rinoa opens up. Not sure what's going to happen to her now. Squall reassures her that she will be okay, but she's scared of being possessed again, worrying that another time could end up even worse, afraid of becoming everyone's enemy. Squall vows to be her knight. She talks about how, if it comes down to it, Squall should be the one to kill her, at which he assures her that that will never happen. He promises that he will protect her somehow and asks her to trust him. She asks if she should just stay in Esthar until they have a way to deal with Ultimecia, and he tells her that he'll just end up going back after her. Rinoa then tells Squall about a nightmare she had. The two were trying to meet each other, but she ran all over the planet because she didn't know where to find him. Squall tells her that it was just a dream and not to worry about it, before deciding to make her a promise. If she's ever looking for him, she can come back here to this meadow and find him. She promises to be there for him too, and this is a touching moment with some foreshadowing for what's to come. Zell then interrupts them to tell them that they've been asked to come to Esthar's presidential palace by a man named Kiros. This gets Squall's attention and they start to head out, but before they can, Edea comes out to talk to them. She tells Squall about how she took the powers of another sorceress 13 years ago, and that it was in this very same spot where they're talking now. She did it to protect her children, but it led to a bitter story for her. She then urges Squall to keep fighting no matter the cost. It's a sombering moment, but she's right. They can't give up. Not now, no matter what. The crew head back to Esthar and into the palace, where they finally meet Kiros, Ward, and the president of Esthar, Laguna. I know that there was a lot more planned for the three that got cut from the final game, but there was plenty enough in this game that seeing them all together here was absolutely awesome. Laguna knows that it was Squall and the rest that were in their heads now. Elone has told him. But she's been abducted by Galbadia, and she is now inside the Lunatic Pandora. You can get Laguna's story here as well. He tells you about how when he rescued Elone, he couldn't just go home, so he agreed to help take down Sorceress Adele. Laguna set up a trap for the sorceress, luring her to the sorceress memorial before shoving her into the sealing device. Then they decided to send her to the moon to keep the world safe. Laguna wanted to head back to Rain then, but the people of Esthar wanted him to be the president for leading the charge to take care of Sorceress Adele. Laguna sent Elone back to Rain, but before he could return himself, Rain died. Elone then went missing, so without much else to do, Laguna stayed and ran the country. It's a sad story. It seems that Laguna's life was always going on the way that it needed, even if it wasn't the way that he wanted. Which I think is something that we all feel is happening to ourselves at least sometimes in our lives. After hearing Laguna's story, they bring in Dr. Odin to explain their plan. He created a device that in the future is used by Ultimecia to send herself back into the past, called the Junction machine alone. Odin believes that Ultimecia cannot go far enough back in time with the machine to use time compression, which is her ultimate goal, and that's why she wants Alone. That way she can send herself even further back and achieve her goal. The plan here is to rescue Alone and use her power to actually give Ultimecia the time compression she wants, but then to free the sorceress, in this case Rinoa, so that the crew can then head to Ultimecia themselves to defeat her, saving the world and saving time from the tyrannical sorceress. Now, yeah, it's a convoluted scheme, but by now, we should be used to that. So the plan here is to ram into the Lunatic Pandora using Ragnarok to kill Edea, forcing Ultimecia to use Rinoa for this plot. Even now, I feel like I understand the plan, but not well enough to properly explain it. So let's not even try to do that now. We're nearing the end of the adventure, and I've kept you here this long, so it's long enough as it is. Speaking of, if you are still here, thank you. It means a lot. So with that out of the way, let's get going. The Ragnarok blasts through the Lunatic Pandora's armor and blows a hole in the side before you depart. You immediately run into Raijin and Fujin. They're here for Cypher, but they don't seem committed to the plan, although they do fight you. But once they've been dispatched, they head deeper into the Pandora. You follow suit before you run into Biggs and Wedge again, but this time, instead of trying to fight you, Biggs just quits his job, making Wedge quit as well as they head out. It's nice to see them growing as people and at least realizing that they are on the wrong side of history here. As you head in deeper, you'll eventually make your way to Cypher, there with his friends, but the two of them decide that they are done fighting. They tell Cypher that they miss who he was and that they're here for him, but that he's being manipulated. Cypher's appearance has changed. His beautiful long coat is now in tatters. He's been through a lot, and while he's still extremely dangerous, I just feel bad for him here. He challenges us to one more battle, and here we get to close up a thread that I brought up earlier. Remember how I said you should go ahead and get Odin? Well, here's why. The battle begins with Odin charging in to face Cypher. Now it's weird because he usually only shows up for general enemies, never bosses. But as he rushes in, Cypher slices Odin in half, destroying the Guardian Force and sending his sword flying into the sky, opening a rift into the universe before it's snatched away by a hand. From there, the battle with Cypher is pretty basic, but this is Cypher at his most dangerous. He's just taken down one of the strongest Guardian forces in the world. But eventually in this battle, a new spirit enters the fray. Gilgamesh arrives to dispatch Cypher. The Gilgamesh from Final Fantasy V. He was banished to the Void in that game, but Zantetsuken ripped the Void open, giving him the fourth weapon he needed and a way back out into a new world. Now, I know he's not as useful as Odin, but by this time, most enemies should be easy enough to put down anyways, and this scene playing out makes this battle go from being just another slog against Cypher into something truly special and memorable. So I would highly recommend it rather than waiting just so you could have Odin. After the battle's over, Cypher kidnaps Rinoa, who just can't stop being captured. He takes her to the now Ultimecia-controlled sorceress Edea, who binds Rinoa to her in an attempt to join their powers. The ensuing battle is a big, nerve-wracking machine because you have to attack Edea and not accidentally kill Rinoa. But once Edea falls, we reach the crucial point of the plan. Laguna and Alone then rush in, and Alone sends Rinoa and Ultimecia back in time, before drawing Rinoa back to her time, leaving Ultimecia stuck in the distant past. Now, they just have to prepare for time compression to begin. And as it does, the world and reality begin to warp around you. The party is falling and falling, struggling to stay together as they have to focus on their bonds. It's surreal watching this play out as they fall through the sea and back out, coming eventually to land at Edea's room inside the Galbadian palace. There's tons of save points lined up, showing you just how messed up reality is. Then you walk to the next room and see Edea there. Two of her, as she stands up to face you. And of course it's not actually Edea. You have to take down several variants of sorceresses in a row here. Thankfully, they're pretty simple to take down, and interestingly, each one loads you into another battlefield that you've been to throughout the course of the game. Eventually, you'll take down the waves of sorceresses before coming to the old orphanage, but it's not falling apart now, leaving us with no idea of where in time that we really are. You head towards the beach, and then reality shows itself, seeing a battlefield riddled with fallen seeds, before a massive castle that's floating in the sky above the orphanage, anchored there by massive chains. As I said, there's fallen seed members all over, showing that this battle has been going in the favor of Ultimecia. Squall heads up the chains to reach the castle, but on the sides of the chains are secret doorways back to the world, which are really useful if you need to grind, but the cities are all closed off, so there's really not much else to worry about. You head up the chain and go into the castle. This place is massive and one of the most impressive dungeons I've seen in any Final Fantasy game. As soon as you head inside, you realize that all of your abilities and commands have been sealed away, and in order to get them back, you have to take down 8 bosses. This leads to zigzagging all over the castle. During these boss encounters, you'll also get chances to draw any guardian forces that you missed out on from all the other bosses. And while I could break down the entire castle, I just want to talk about one of the bosses before we move to the end. See, this game has 2 super bosses, and while I could have addressed the deep sea research facility, the super boss there is too similar to this one that I want to discuss, so let's talk about my favorite super boss in the series, Omega Weapon. This guy is an absolute nightmare. He can wipe the party in a hurry, and I died to him countless times when I was a kid. Omega Weapon is hidden in a puff of lingering smoke, and you've got to have your party, which is split in 2, ring a bell in one end of the castle, and then switch to the party that's going to take him on in the other part. And just seeing this guy here, knowing that you're in for something insane, is so intimidating. And since this game predates achievements, when you actually beat him, you get a card showing that you've won. And now that he's been taken down, it's time to wrap things up. We make our way through the tower, and this place is visually stunning. But once you get to the top, all that's left is a small walkway before you finally reach your goal. Now it's time to head inside and finally confront Sorceress Ultimecia. Ultimecia is sitting on her throne waiting on your arrival. She knew this time would come. We don't know much about her despite all of the theories that are out there about the sorceress. She compares seed to swarms of locusts and says that we are what's stopping time compression from fully taking place. Ultimecia then starts the battle by choosing 3 of the party members at random. And as she wipes them out, they fade away as the next party member comes in to take their place. Her first stage reminds me of facing Edea. She has some strong attacks, but nothing too outrageous. However, this is just the beginning. As things go, Ultimecia conjures up her own guardian force, using the creature that Squall has thought up as a symbol for himself, Griever. This, of course, has led to the Ultimecia is Renoa theory, and while I find it fascinating, it's been pretty well clarified that this is not the case and is only a theory. But there's a lot of theories out about this game, and they're all pretty cool to think about. Griever looks like a weird nightmare version of the creature that's on Squall's ring and necklace, which is a lion. And Griever is more bat-like, which to me kind of felt like Ultimecia playing mind games. But once you beat this thing down enough, Ultimecia decides to give the party some more nightmare fuel, junctioning herself to Griever to create an even more insane abomination, which Squall has no time for. This battle was extremely difficult when I played it as a kid, but after learning more about the Junction system and realizing that the higher level I was, the harder the enemies here will be, this can be one of the easiest games in the series. However, difficulty does nothing to change how awesome this entire battle is. And taking down Grievamecia leads to her true final form, as the sorceress pulls us out of the castle and into space to take on this faceless nightmare, which has the original body of Ultimecia hanging in the lower half in place of her legs. Some real nightmare fuel. Ultimecia may not be as iconic as a villain like Sephiroth, but she's been present in the game from the start. When you first faced Edea, it was Edea as a vessel for Ultimecia. When you faced Adele, she again was possessed by this nightmare from the future. Squall and the others have suffered greatly at the will of the sorceress, and here in the final stages, Squall doesn't hold back, letting loose on her. Now, if the battle goes on, she has a longer speech, but that obviously didn't happen here. The battle is over, and now Final Fantasy VIII wraps everything up with one of the greatest finales in the series. We cut first to Irving in a void. He and the others are all there, trying to get home, calling out to each other to remember. We see Renoa coming up last as she is headed to the meadow at the orphanage, where she and Squall promised to meet. Renoa is distraught, calling for Squall, who hasn't been seen yet. Then, in the dark, we see him. Squall is lost. He hears voices calling to him and he turns, seeing himself as a child running off to find Alone, and then Edea runs up, and Squall realizes that he's now in the past. Edea asks him about the boy who ran by, and Squall assures her that the kid won't run off. Then, Ultimecia appears. She is a husk now, defeated, in a state of undying. She has to pass on her powers before she can move on. Squall prepares to face her again, but Edea assures him that she can take the powers to protect the children. Ultimecia doesn't want to go, but it's finally her time. Edea takes on Ultimecia's power and asks Squall if this is the end. She then asks who he is, realizing that he knows her. He tells her about Garden and Seed, and that it was her idea. Then she realizes he is Squall, and she asks him to return to his time. She has such an understanding and wisdom here, assuring young Squall that everything is okay before seeing the adult Squall off. He salutes her and then leaves their time, remembering now that he's not alone. He finally trusts his friends and starts to call out to them, but nobody answers. He's opening up, but he's lost. Squall freaks out and runs. There's panic in his actions and thoughts, fading into the dark before we cut to another scene where Squall is in the middle of a desert. We have no idea where to go. He looks so tired, trying to push forward. He's forgetting, and as he walks, he's exhausted. Squall eventually collapses, unable to keep going. He's lost, out of time, and realizes that he's standing on a tiny piece of earth in the void, ready to give up, as Renoa is in the meadow searching for him. She refuses to give up on Squall, who then sees a feather, a sign from Renoa, remembering the promise. He starts seeing things, his memory failing as he sees flashbacks, but Renoa's blurry. Something's wrong. This scene is a nightmare, and of course, being a scene with no narration, I'm only able to explain it how I interpret it. Everything he's been through flashes through Squall's mind, all leading back to Renoa, who keeps fading as he's losing himself. Squall is spiraling here, trying to cling to whatever he can as nightmare scenarios creep into his mind. And then, as he's at his most vulnerable, Renoa approaches. After all of his fighting, all of his heroics, it's Renoa who finally comes to Squall's rescue. He's unresponsive, and Renoa holds him tight as the darkness subsides, leaving Squall in her arms there in the flowers, the promise holding true. We then see scenes of the others. Cypher is back to himself with Raijin and Fujin, and it's good to see him like this again. They are passed by the garden before we see Laguna in a field. His mind wanders back to the evening that he proposed to Rain. And yes, I didn't say it before, but they are Squall's parents. The game is careful to tease it without saying it outright. And I really wish that Laguna and Squall had pressed the issue in the game, but seeing Laguna and Rain together here is one of my favorite scenes in all of this game. It then cuts back to the present, and Laguna is visiting Rain's grave, where it confirms that they were married. We then see Alone is there as well, with Kiros and Ward. They're finally all reunited. There's a bittersweet sense of healing here as the game fades into the credits. And that's not quite all, but that was Final Fantasy VIII. An epic adventure that makes me emotional every time I even think about it for very long. During the credits, we see everyone at the garden during a celebration, through the lens of a video camera. Edea and Sid are there together. The members of the party are all hanging out and having a good time. I've talked more about myself in this video than I ever thought I would. Making this has felt like therapy for me. Facing a lot of my own past and looking at moments in my life that led me to where I am today. Final Fantasy VIII has lived eclipsed by the shadow of VII. But it's a game that can absolutely stand on its own. Square tried to do something new here. They didn't play it safe when logic would have called for them to do more of what they did in VII. They took chances here and they told a story. I understand why some hate this game, but I just don't. I love it. Seeing the growth of Squall and how he changes as a person is just incredible. This game taught me that it's okay to open up to others, that you can trust people and that you don't have to do everything on your own. And for that, I'll always be thankful. And if you've made it to this point, I'm extremely thankful for you too. So with all of this, I'm the Unhinged Gamer, and this has been my Final Fantasy VIII Retrospective. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.